Hey, everybody, good evening. It is April 28th, Tuesday evening, and we're catching some of you all at dinner time. So I know some of you will be watching the replay perhaps, but I just want to say thank you so much for being part of my community and for letting me be a part of your life. And we're so excited. This week we have a lot of great interviews. Earlier today, we already did an interview, and it really went just amazingly. If you didn't get a chance to catch that with Allison Rose, please watch that later. Allison did a great job, and I was very, very honored to have her. And we have another guest here, which I'll introduce in a minute. But I did want to mention just a few quick things. If you want to consider doing an interview yourself on this channel, please reach out to me. All the ways to connect with me are beneath this video. If you're interested in one-on-one, sort of like peer support, not coaching, not any kind of counseling, I'm not licensed, but if you are looking for one-on-one peer support, I'm available for that. So reach out as well through the methods of either Facebook or email. And then we just did a poetry slam this past weekend. It was great. Had some great people come on and share, as well as one person even sang, and with a guitar. Nonetheless, it was a great time. We're going to start doing that more often, maybe every 2 months. And so, if you are in any way inclined towards poetry, deconstruction, deconversion poetry, or any just something about what you're learning in life, please do consider letting me know. We'd love to put you on the list to do our next poetry slam in a few weeks. And if anyone is able to support this channel, all the ways to do that are beneath this video. With that being said, I'm going to jump in with our guest tonight. Tonight we're speaking with Kristi Williams. Kristi, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hi, I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I so appreciate you being here. It's awesome to finally meet you. I've heard good things about you. I was just listening to your interview with Timmy Gibson, whom I've been honored to interview as well in the past, but trying to catch up with all the great people in this community, and I just can't keep up fast enough. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to start with a quick bio, and then we'll have Kristi share a little bit about herself. But Kristi is a religious trauma coach, a certified life coach, and a certified trauma-informed coach. And I have to pick your brain at some point offline about how you get through all those, because at some point I'm thinking I need to go that route. But she's also a speaker, and she lives in Central Michigan. She has 2 kids, and she's a former Seventh-day Adventist. I have not had a Seventh-day Adventist on the channel in quite a while, if I recall. I'll have to look that up. But she also is a former neurospecialty nurse with a background in pediatric neurology, neurotrauma, and stroke care, and drawing from her clinical expertise in brain science as well as her lived experience as a survivor of high control religion. Kristi helps people to heal the neurological and emotional impact of oppressive religion. And after experiencing religious psychosis and rebuilding her life through trauma-informed healing, she now teaches the neurobiology of trauma, embodied trauma release, and the power of human connection. And her work blends scientific insights, of course, compassion, and her personal story to support others reclaiming their inner autonomy and starting their new life. But that's what I know about you so far. Could you tell us more, and then some fun things as well?
Oh my gosh, that was the most fantastic introduction I've had in my life. Thank you. I'm honored. Um, so I'm a normal human most of the time. Sometimes I'm not normal at all. I just finished Improv 1 school. I love comedy. I think comedy is like art for the mind, so healthy. And I'm pitching my first TED Talk right now for the neurobiology of religious trauma. And I'm hoping to bring comedy into the speaking space. And
Awesome.
I just learned how to ride an electric skateboard a month or 2 ago. So hopefully I can get one of my own before long. Tons of fun.
Nice. That's awesome. And I've heard you do a lot of traveling. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit less at the moment because my kids are young. But I have been to all 50 states.
Wow. I can't even imagine. That's incredible. Was that mostly as a kid and a teenager, or was that as a young adult?
Some of it was mission trips.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
It was as a young adult. So growing up Seventh Day Adventist, we're a pretty insular group where we went to Adventist schools. So I grew up in Michigan, but I went to high school in Montana. So I hit all the states between there, traveling back and forth. Then I went to college in Tennessee. So that was all those states. And then when I married my husband, we lived in Southern California, and he and I think we both had been to like 25 states when we got married. And so we're like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to hit all of them? So whenever we went places, we would sometimes just go out of our way and made it a point. And our last state, I believe, was Hawaii, and we went there 10 years ago. So I think I was 25 or 26 when I hit 50 states.
Wow, that's awesome. And now you got to start working on all the countries of the world too.
Yep.
Get to them. Well, we're so glad you're here. I'd love to later in the talk with you just get to some of your more current work and talk through all that because it sounds amazing. But before we get into any of that, could you just tell us where this all started from? What was it like growing up in your family and your church? And especially if I did not grow up Seventh Day Adventist, and so I'd love it if you could highlight anything that you think of as maybe uniquenesses that evangelicals might have had a little different. But if you could just tell us what it was like, and especially if you could tell us about what it was like to think about being saved or in a relationship with God.
Okay. Making notes so I hit all this. Great questions. So I say this, growing up Adventist in a lot of ways is very similar to an evangelical experience. And in some ways, it's pretty different. And if for people who follow me on Facebook, I'll often refer to the Seventh day Adventist Church as a cult. I don't get hung up on the word, I get hung up on the impact. And so this is going to apply to a lot of us raised in evangelical circles as well. I don't care if you call it a cult, I care about impact. Um, Now within the Adventist church, probably similar to any church, there's a spectrum of how healthy it is and how heavy the impact hits. Michigan happens to be a particularly conservative area for the Adventist church, meaning it's less healthy. It's higher control, higher litigiousness and the legalism. Um, so growing up Adventist, my mom was raised Adventist, so I'm a fourth generation Adventist, which is very typical as an Adventist. My dad actually wasn't really raised too religious per se, maybe kind of quasi Christian. Um, it's interesting when you're born into it, you never get that chance to really actively question it. I mean, you're indoctrinated. You are indoctrinated. It is a mind programming. My dad actually got baptized into the Adventist church when I was around 2 years old. And you know, I remember having some interesting thoughts probably by the time I was 10. I was going to Adventist school. And one of the most interesting thoughts was this. This entire thing is built around the Bible. Now, as Adventists, we also have our own prophet, like Mormons. We had Ellen White.
Right.
So it's kind of built around Ellen White, but they're going to say it's built around the Bible. But the odd thing to me was this. I really couldn't remember anyone ever reading me the Bible. We had some memory verses. We talked about the Bible. I knew tons of Bible stories, but I knew almost nothing about the book.
Hmm.
So when I was around 10 years old, I had a Bible in my bedroom and I thought, well, this is odd being in a church all about the Bible. And I don't actually really know anything about this. I think I did actually know the books of the Bible in order. Couldn't tell you a thing about what was in any of them. So I started reading it. And I started reading Psalms, and a lot of it I liked, some of it I found confusing. I was baptized at 10. I remember being super nervous about being baptized, but it felt like, on the one hand, it felt like an expectation, like this is definitely something I have to do at some point, or I ought to do, and I do love Jesus. Um, and I had a group of friends that were getting baptized, so I'm like, well, might as well join the crowd. Um, so in the Adventist church, you go through a series of Bible studies that are doctrinal. They're teaching you how to be an Adventist. And then you take some vows, including no cigarettes, no drinking, and no tea and coffee. You can't drink tea and coffee. And again, this kind of depends on which church, which Adventist church you're at, or what group you're with, how much they're going to make a deal of this. But in Michigan, if you're wearing a wedding ring, you got to take off your wedding ring before you're in the baptismal tank in a lot of places. So, and then baptism is equated with church membership. You're not getting baptized into Christ. You're getting baptized into the Seventh Day Adventist Church. It's like
Right.
it's one and the same thing.
Hmm.
Um,
Did they make
so
a
I
big
got
deal the meat stuff? They're often vegetarians, right?
Yep, yeah. So it's kind of like tiers or levels where it's like you're definitely not supposed to eat unclean meat per the Levitical laws, and that would be considered sinful. Now I'm like, what? Well, then there's gelatin and marshmallows. Can you lose your salvation over a marshmallow? This is the real question here. Um, but then the next level, they encourage you to be vegetarian, although Ellen White said cheese is wholly unfit for food and should never pass into the mouth. And I don't know the exact quote, but essentially, people who eat cheese won't be in heaven.
Wow.
And yet, most Adventists eat tons of cheese. But then there's a handful, I'd say, I don't know, 15% of Adventists that are vegan. And that was also encouraged by Ellen White. And I was one of those Adventists.
Hmm.
So you kind of got the whole spectrum there.
Sorry for the
Um,
technical questions, but just out of curiosity, do people really listen to Ellen White still, or is she like?
ah,
Because it sounds like she's got some wacko ideas, but if she's like the main prophetess, then
mm-hmm,
you can't
mm-hmm.
really just drop her.
I'm so glad you asked that question. Um, they listen to her in name only. They give her lip service by and
Yeah.
large. And again, this is one of those things. So when I was baptized at 10, one of the gifts I got was her Conflict of the Ages series. It's 5 books. That's kind of her main writings, although she had something close to 100 books altogether. And I have read, I don't know, the majority, lots of her writings, unlike almost every Adventist out there. And that's why I am where I am today. That's why they're slim, because they don't read their prophet. Her stuff is wacko. Like, she says you shouldn't have investments. Like, if you have personal property as an investment, you need to sell it and give that money to the church so that Jesus can come, and this is sinning. And like every Adventist I know, like, they've got investments. She said that, they don't read her. She has some really fun stuff. There's really good reason to believe she had an alcohol addiction she was hiding. She had huge marital problems to the point that she left the United States and moved to Australia because she wasn't getting along with her husband. And
Wow.
she was trying to start a church down in Battle Creek, or a school in Battle Creek, Michigan. It was having issues. And she kept telling the congregation God couldn't bless them because they were jerking off too much.
Nice.
So, but like, people don't know, they don't really read her. So she gets quoted a lot at churches, but they mostly draw from her main works. Now, her main works going to be especially 2 books, one called Desire of Ages, one called Steps to Christ. These 2 books are mostly plagiarized. So they're essentially devotional books, but she didn't even write them. What she did, she pulled from foreign authors. She did not pull from US based authors, because in her day and age, plagiarism you could only be held legally accountable if you were plagiarizing US based authors. So the Adventist Church hired an attorney in the past, I don't know, a few decades, to investigate this claim that Ellen White plagiarized. And the attorney cleared her name and said, no, she didn't. The thing is, legally, it wasn't plagiarism. But when you've got a prophet of God, how do you feel about them drawing like almost exclusively? It's not even extensive. It's like 80% drawn from other sources, claiming that it's a revelation from God. And one time I confronted someone very close to me about this issue, and this person said God gave her wisdom to know which writings to plagiarize from.
Oh my gosh. The way that we
The
justify
backflips.
everything. Yeah,
Yep.
it's insane.
Yep.
Now, do you?
And I mean, that the backflips are throughout Christianity, right? Like, that's
Yeah,
not exclusive to Adventism.
yeah, absolutely. Well, can I ask this? What is the basic message of being right with God and salvation? Do you have that same kind of verbiage? And is there a sense of like,
Mm.
for us, it's a simple bad news, good news equation. That you're a sinner that deserves punishment. God is a wonderful Savior who has provided salvation through
Mhm.
Christ. And the only thing that has to happen at that point is you have to repent of your sins and place your faith in Jesus as your substitute. He died in your place. If you believe that, you turn from your sin and turn to Christ, accept him as your Savior, then you are in a right relationship with God. Judicially, he's declaring you righteous, and therefore someday when you're in heaven, he will actually make you glorified and righteous in reality.
Mhm.
Um, is it anything like that, or is it totally different? And do you have a personal relationship with God in the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Mhm. Yeah, it's essentially like that, but again, the actual belief lies along a continuum. So what you just said would be very progressive Adventist thought. And that is not what Ellen White taught. Although I would say it's what perhaps the majority of Adventists out there today believe. So Ellen White taught something wild called the investigative judgment theory, investigative judgment theology. And this is how I ended up in the psych ward, is because of the teaching about salvation. Um, so, okay, yeah, this goes to your question of being saved. So, El- here's how the Adventist Church got started. It was back in the 1800s. There's this guy named William Miller. In a way, he's the father of evangelicalism and tent revivals and meetings. And so he was preaching. He had concluded from Daniel and Revelation that Jesus was about to come again. And so all these people called the Millerites, and there's a lot of movements that came out of this Millerite movement. They all were like very evangelistic. You need to sell everything you have, tell the world, the world's going to end. And so these people were like selling their farms and selling their homes and all their possessions. Like they were depleting themselves of everything because Jesus was going to come. Newsflash, he didn't come. So, but then, and I forget exactly how it came to be like the Seventh-day Adventists, but I believe they were the one group who was like, well, something happened that day. It was October, 22, 1844. And they're like, so we must have just made a mistake in our interpretation of what happened. But initially they set like 5 more dates that they thought he was going to come again, and like he didn't come again. But then finally they said, oh, wait, actually, it's something that happened in heaven. So on October 22, 1844, Jesus moved from the holy place in the heavenly sanctuary. It's like the Israelite sanctuary in heaven into the most holy place. And so suddenly they're not wrong. It's this kind of face-saving move. And so then they
Crazy.
have this all-night prayer vigil for the church leadership for God to show them what he did, and nothing happens. So this one guy, Hiram Edson, is walking home. He's been up all night. He's walking through a cornfield, and suddenly he like gets this flash of insight that Jesus moved into the most holy place. So what's Jesus doing? So there's a recording angel writing down everybody's sins. It's very similar to a Santa Claus situation, naughty and nice. But then Jesus has to go and like check the angel's work. Okay, so person by person, case by case, we got the good bucket, bad bucket. So yeah, it's that duality, black and white, right? Save, lost, save, lost. So Ellen White says, soon, none know how soon, the judgment will pass to the cases of the living. Meaning, today could be the day that your case comes up for review. Good bucket, bad bucket. Now, so in Adventist theology, if you actually read your prophet, guys, you have the opportunity to repent of your sins and be forgiven up until the moment your name comes up for review. And even at that, it is not so simple as just like accept Jesus and be saved. On paper, yes, in that moment you're saved, but you got to keep like confessing and repenting, which that's Christianity too, right? Like they say it's just believe and be saved, but it is not. You got to read the fine print.
Right.
Like I heard a Baptist say once, she's like, yeah, so I got baptized and they said I was, once saved, always saved. So then when I became an atheist, I asked them what happened and they say, oh, well, it wasn't real. It was never real. So they've always got a way to get out of it. So with
That's
Adventism,
crazy.
yeah, it's like just believe on Jesus and be saved, and then don't drink tea and coffee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So they're saying
So
you can lose your salvation though if you do those things. Like
yeah,
you can be
well,
saved and then
okay.
still go to hell.
There's so much fine print. It's not that you lose your salvation by doing those things. It's that if you're doing those things, it shows the condition of your heart, that you have a sinful heart. And Jesus can't allow a sinful heart into heaven because sin will never rise a second time. If he let a sinner into heaven, it would pollute and corrupt heaven. And so he gives you free choice and he gives you his power to overcome every sin. And so this is where investigative judgment gets really sticky, really nasty. You not only just accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, or you not only just ask forgiveness, you have to develop a character that becomes impervious to sinning. You'll never sin again. Now, because this is like the perfect formula for really bad narcissism. You're not supposed to actually believe, you don't know when this happens, and you're not supposed to believe that it has happened because that would be pride. But you're still supposed to be able to accomplish this, never sinning again. Define sin for me. And once that day happens, when your case comes up for review in the investigative judgment and you get dropped in the good bucket or bad bucket, it is based on your character. And if you're in the good bucket, you have no need to worry because you have developed a sinless character and you won't sin again anyway. So you're good to go. Um, So I actually had never really heard all of that until I went to a super conservative off-grid boarding academy. We made our own electricity. We did not have phones or internet. We lived an hour from the nearest gas station and we were preparing for the end of times. We were canning food. And if we canned applesauce, because we were very, very budget conscious, and we reused the lids, if that can of applesauce had mold on the top, we scraped off the mold and ate the applesauce. We made our
Wow.
own bread from scratch. So I lived out there off grid in Montana for 4 years. Now I wanted to go. And so, sometimes people from my past will say to me, like, hey, you chose that. That was what you wanted. And it's like, let's just think about what circumstances would need to be present in a teenager's life for them to want to live like that. Um, So that's where I started hearing more and more about this investigative judgment idea, but it still wasn't really front and center until I was like, I think about 30 years old. And my mom came across a book we had all grown up and moved out of the house. It was one of us kids had this book from school at the house. So there was this lady named Margaret Davis, and she compiled everything Ellen White said about investigative judgment, salvation, whatever, into this little book from Satan. Uh, and it just really drove home this extremism of overcoming every sin and just fear and terror and end of times and saved and lost and perfectionism. And my mom just kind of kept touting the virtues of this. And looking back, it's like, I think a lot of times there's so much psychology involved in all this religious trauma, but it's like, what I want to say, there's kind of these feedback loops where when you grow up in these very religious homes, there's an emotional void um, that creates a thirst, or you're like seeking who am I? You're looking for identity, for community, connection, purpose. And religion delivers on those things. And it's kind of like the higher the level of trauma, the more proclivity there is to extreme religions and cult like groups because it delivers a more intense sense of, in the Adventist church, we say we're the remnant. You're special, you're set apart, you're chosen. And I mean, this is going to be, there's elements of that all throughout fundamentalism Christianity. Um,
Yeah, I was a Calvinist, so
so
we align with that a lot.
Oh, yeah. Ugh, Calvinist.
We were
Wow.
elect before the foundation of the world.
Yeah. I have to figure out like Calvinism. I mean, that's just wild to try to wrap your mind around. Uh, because I was like, look, if everyone's already born, saved, or lost, like, why would you ever do evangelism? And it's like, uh, someone I know was Calvinist, and he's like, well, it's like you had to convince yourself that you were one of the elect. It's
Yes.
like that.
Well, it wasn't like that for me, but I could imagine some people would struggle with that. Can you hear me okay?
Hello.
Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
Hello.
We disconnected? Oh, just gonna rejoin here, no worries. While we're waiting for her to rejoin, I'll just go through a few quick comments. Hey, Jonathan, great to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Interesting. Oh, thank you so much for your super chat. Jonathan sent $10 and then a super sticker for 5. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really, really appreciate your support. It means the world to me. It really does. I'm trying very, very hard to keep doing this. So every little bit helps. It really does. Thank you so much for your kindness and your generosity. No cheese, no coffee allowed. Yeah, what the heck? Yeah, they weren't allowed a lot of things. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes. Yeah, I think I had a timer kick me off our call.
Oh no. Oh no.
I'm good to go.
Perfect. Well, we were I was just going through some quick comments and super chats, but I'll come back to those in a little bit. I'll read one more here. Alex was saying the worst part is that we were forced to go to church, even though we didn't want to as kids. No wonder it creates trauma. Yeah, for a lot of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So much
Yes.
for free will.
Compromising our autonomy.
Yeah, exactly. But with
Yeah,
Calvinism,
so much for free will. That's a good. Yes. Wow. Wow.
with Calvinism, what I think it does to those who really they get past the whole issue of am I really saved? Like, and I was past that. I was way past that question of am I really saved? I knew that I was saved because as a Christian in general, and especially as a Calvinist, the question that comes up is always simply, if you're not sure you're a Christian, then just ask yourself, what's the deepest desire of your heart? And the
Oh.
deepest desire of my heart from the earliest days was always to spread the gospel and to bring people into the kingdom, to
Mhm.
tell people about God's love. And like, that's not something that a sinful heart does. That's the work of the Spirit. So you're clearly saved
Mm.
because you've got the fruit of the
Mm.
Spirit.
Mm.
But what I question now is, okay, so I went through the whole process of being a Christian and then getting to be a Calvinist, where I was convinced that I hadn't first chosen God. I had actually responded to God choosing me. He chose me, therefore I can now choose him. I was not drowning and he pulled me out of the water. I was the corpse at the bottom of the ocean and he had to give me new life. And he did that. And so I was just internally grateful. But what I find fascinating and ironic is that I'm now an atheist. So the question is, was I predestined to be an atheist? Who knows? Romans 9, I was a
The
vessel of dishonor.
unanswerable. Yeah. Yes, Romans
Anyway,
9.
and I don't want to get
Okay.
too into my. I can tell my story another time. I want to make sure we get back to your story, but that's the Calvinistic side of it for me.
Yeah, no, oh, Calvinism makes my mind do backflips bad, as it should anyone's mind. So
Especially if you're
okay,
like the full 5-pointer. If you're
yeah,
there's
tulip.
some, yeah. If you're like a 4.5, there's some ways that it makes a little bit of sense. But if you're 5, it also is an extreme arrogance issue. I mean, it's like we
Yeah,
are,
yes.
and of course in America, most of God's elect just happen to be white. Ironically enough,
Okay, so that brings up one of my bullet points I just jotted down here. This investigative judgment thing. These beliefs create outcomes. They shape personalities and personas. And so both Calvinism and this investigative judgment creates, okay, with investigative judgment I saw kind of like a egotistical narcissism of, hey, I've overcome every sin, I'm the elect, whatever, right? I'm better than the rest of y'all, God's favorite child. Or on the flip side, it creates depression. I'm not that. I'm not called, I'm not chosen. Did you ever see this, like people in your church group or whatever kind of flip into that, like the doubt or like the depression or despair to be like, maybe I'm not the elect?
I never saw it, but I've had people on the channel tell me about it. So it probably was around me and I just didn't hear about it. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
suspect that,
they're quieter.
yeah, because they're probably very ashamed of it.
They're exactly. Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, I experienced it with people close to me firsthand. And yeah, you're right. No, it was the egotistical ones were the loud ones and the depressed ones were more quiet and withdrawn. But I could see what was going on. I could feel that. It's just so
Yeah. My
heavy.
my issue was not as much. I knew that you could never really see someone's heart. My issue is always basically, are you willing? Is there fruit that you're willing to do absolutely anything for God? In other words, who owns you? The question is, who
Mm,
owns you? Who is your
mhm,
master?
mhm.
And the question of like, you don't. I got into something called lordship salvation. Have you heard of that concept?
No.
Lordship salvation basically is there was a dichotomy that got created by some evangelists and pastors, where they said you can accept Jesus as your savior, but you don't have to worry about obeying him because that's like a human work. That you
Mhm.
gotta work on your heart and your sinfulness over time. What
Mhm.
you need to do is simply make a simple declaration of faith. I believe, and that settles it. That settles your account with God. And so other pastors in response said, no, hell no. Like God isn't looking to come in and be like, a seventh or a quarter of his real personality to you. He's looking to be all that he is, and all that he is includes savior and master. And if he is your master, and you're basically saying, God, come on in, but I only want half of you or a quarter of you, then you haven't really accepted him at all. You either take him, in other words, he comes in and says, I'm taking over. Thank you very much. I'm in charge. I will clean house. I will make you holy. You will not be able to take me and sin and will not coexist. So when you get to the point of lordship salvation, saying, who owns you? Well, Jesus owns me. Well, if Jesus owns you, then you'll do anything for him, including give your life away as a martyr or as a
Uh-huh.
missionary. And that's what my point in saying that is that that's what shocked me, is that I would see people that are like, I just kind of want to live a white picket fence Christian life, middle class. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
where are the people who want to go to the deepest, darkest places of the world and give the gospel to
Mhm.
people that are about to burn? Isn't that what you want? Don't and people are like, well, I don't know, that's a little bit too extreme. Like, what's extreme about it? People are dying and going to hell. And so that was what always got me, is like, you could, with Calvinism, you can't see people's hearts. You can't see if God elected you, but you can see if people are willing to do anything for Christ if he's their master. And that's where
Mhm.
that's again where your arrogance comes in of like, oh, so you're not really willing to give everything for Christ. So I guess you're kind of a casual Christian, you know? And
Yeah, I one day I saw this analogy in my mind. I thought about it as Adventism, but it's all these groups where it's like it's kind of like a cave where like people who are standing in the entrance are like, I'm free in Jesus. Like, look at all this spaciousness that I have. But it's interesting. A lot of us in this deconstruction space, we were the most dedicated, the most double down, like to give everything for Jesus. Yeah, I would have been a missionary to the middle of nowhere. I would have laid down my life for him. I would have done all of that, you know. And so like it's like you're going into this cave and it's getting constricted, narrower and narrower, where it's like it's choking you, it's suffocating. Like, I just spoke with a guy the other day who was saying he had gone to school and became an accountant, and then he couldn't find work he wanted in that area, so he needed to switch careers. And I think it was an Adventist pastor said he would be like disobeying God's will to switch careers. And he's like, now just how? Because I'm the one who chose to be an accountant. And this is the way it constricts you, you know, all these things you can and can't do. And so then those of us who went in so deep got to the point where we couldn't breathe in that system. A lot of us left for our lives. And then as we're going out and we're passing all the Christians standing at the entrance, like, yay, freedom in Jesus. We're like, no, buddy, no, mm-mm. And then they're like, well, you just don't understand. It's like, no, you have not been where I have been, and you have not seen what I have seen.
yep, exactly. And once you get to that point where you are in it all the way and you are in it to win it and you are fully convinced, you're willing to put up with all these weird things like you were describing it towards the beginning. So many things that should have been red flags to us,
Mm,
they get pushed aside because you're not just a believer, you're now on the almost even as a young person, as a teenager, you're almost like on staff. You're just being groomed so much for
mm,
ministry, and you get to a
mm-hmm.
point where you feel like you're part of something big. You're getting responsibilities left and right, especially as a as a white male in the church. You're getting responsibilities all over, and boy, oh boy, just the ability to see past the cognitive dissonance issues, it just disappears. You just check your brain at the door. Did
Yeah,
you did you feel like
yes.
did you feel like with all the weirdness that you were going through, especially with the end time stuff, that you were able to in any way see red flags, or did it all just seem normal to you?
Yeah, no, and I think I kind of started out saying this, but so when I was 10, I started reading the Bible for myself. I didn't start reading Ellen White at that time, but when I was like 11, I did see red flags big time, and I spoke about them. I saw them clear. I remember being at, it was like a church evangelistic series where all the adults, it was like a Wednesday night. All the adults are in the sanctuary, and us kids were like in the church library, 11, 12, 13 years old. And I remember talking about this concept of a cult. It was kind of a new concept to me because I had heard that Jehovah's Witness and Mormons were cults. They were telling us that. And so I had said to someone, like, well, what makes them a cult? What is this? And they said, they have their own prophet. And I'm like, what? Wait, we have a prophet. And then they were like, well, no, here's what it is. Like, we have been told in scripture that there would be an end times prophet to guide us through, like to Jesus' second coming. But every time God raises up a remnant, Satan makes a counterfeit. And so Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are a counterfeit to God's true church. And my little brain had all kinds of thoughts to this. I was like, number one, that is inconsistent. If you're calling them out for having a prophet because it's competing with the word of God, we do that too. Number two, if I'm in a cult, you all won't tell me that. You won't tell me. And I knew that. Number three, I was like, this concept of being like the remnant church or God's correct church. I knew at 11 years old, I said, look, a church is only going to have one or two messages. Either they are going to tell you they're the correct church, they're God's one called true remnant, whatever, or they're not going to talk about that at all. Like they're not going to be out here dissing other churches. That's just not going to be a part of their persona. But never will you ever have a church come out and say, we're Satan's church. So what they're saying about being the remnant church is a claim. And I knew that. So we had a new family come to this evangelistic series, and there was a girl there about my age. Her name was Kylie. Um, she's still my Facebook friend. And I was like, hey, Kylie, tell me something. At Baptist Church, did they ever tell you that you guys were like the remnant, like God's true people? I needed some data collecting. And she said, no, they never told us anything like that, which is funny because they totally could have at a Baptist church. But I was like, this is like does not bode well. And my little 11-year-old brain, 12-year-old brain, I was hacking so much stuff because I was like, okay, how do you get to heaven? And I was like, I think it's like a math equation where you like add up all the good things you ever did and then you subtract out the bad things. And if you're like positive points, you're going to make it. And I'm like, that's just crazy. But I specifically remember probably maybe a year after that thought, I was like, because this was before I ever heard like the investigative judgment. I was like, you are way luckier if you die slowly, like from cancer, than in a car crash. Because you can repent at the end of your life. And I was like, that makes no damn sense. That makes no, and I saw it at 11, 12 years old. I saw all of this stuff. And I was like, furthermore, what are the statistical odds that God's one true remnant church is this little, little tiny kind of fringe group? But the so I would say like from the ages of 10 to 13, I was not Adventist. Like pardon me, I was fucking out. But then at 13, I went in deep. Partly because I had kind of this like spiritual, emotional experience at summer camp. But I think more than that, honestly, I was a little hellion from 10 to 13, and I felt empty. I felt empty. I was happy to be out of that group, but I was looking for connection, purpose, belonging. And I had like a kind of emotional, spiritual experience. And so I wanted to reconnect with Jesus. And it was like, and then I kind of bought into this thing like, okay, well, the really big thing in the Seventh day Adventist church is that we go to church on Saturday because the fourth commandment says, remember the seventh day to keep it holy. And so I was like, well, if I'm in love with Jesus, then what church should I be a part of? And I'm like, well, I want to like be a part of a church that keeps God's word. And, no one else is keeping the fourth commandment. So I think I'm in the right church. And that's how I went back in. And then I wanted to go to this boarding school. I started doing all the things, even though my family was not like vegan or reading Ellen White. I started doing all those things because I think for some of us, I think it's a personality, but like we don't tolerate cognitive dissonance. And that's why we got out, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's where you'd hope that it would get enough of us out. It certainly took me long enough, but
Yeah.
eventually, slowly but surely.
Yes.
You-
Yeah.
what you're sharing reminds me of. Have you ever heard of the Church of God Restoration Church?
No.
It's in Greenville, Ohio. If you get a chance, go to their YouTube channel later. It's fascinating. Again, Church of God Restoration in Ohio, but they're literally like this little teeny church, and they literally say like we are the only one true church, and our elders are literally like the apostles, like descended from the apostles, or at least they're the only ones with the power of the apostles. And it's crazy how so many groups are willing to basically just hang their hat on the idea that we're the only ones with the truth and the right interpretation.
Yeah.
And as much as, when I was a Christian, we didn't feel like we were in that category. We really were. I mean, when you look at almost anything, the way we interpreted the end times, the way we interpreted whether there was still
Uh-huh.
speaking in tongues that was going on, which our group said, no, it's not. But, the way you interpret everything, and the way you interpret gender roles, like we were like the only ones that had the truest interpretation, and very little respect. I mean, we had a little respect, I would say, but very little respect for other opinions. And certainly we were willing to vilify everybody, especially Roman Catholics. They were, basically
Oh,
the
yeah.
whore of Babylon. And
Yes. Yes.
Seventh Day
Same.
Adventists would have been in the category of bad people. And just like this really is like tribalism on steroids. Like it's us versus them
Yeah.
on steroids. And it's really crazy when you think about it, that what it does for a lot of us, I think we when you step back from it all and realize like take stock and say like, let's do a post-mortem on this, you realize that you've been othering people to
Mhm.
such an extreme degree. And especially,
Mhm.
I love how some people talk with me about this, and I think about it too, is you'd walk into a room and your immediate question is like, it's basically like two or three things. Number one, who in here isn't saved? Number two, who in here is saved but
Mhm.
not glorifying God? Number three, who in here is saved and glorifying God, but they're not part of my church, or they're not interpreting things my way. And it's
Uh-huh.
like that. You don't get to just walk into a room and say, I'm just I'm just so glad to see my fellow humans. I'm so glad. Like, tell me your story.
Yes.
I'll respect you, and
Yes.
you respect me. It's like I
Yes.
have to like scan you all and filter you all. It's crazy.
Yeah, I remember, it was like our first Saturday not going to the Adventist church was just a few years ago, and we went to Costco on Saturday, which was wild because we didn't shop on Sabbath.
Well, we lost Kristi. I'm not sure what happened. She's getting kicked out every 20 minutes or so. We'll see if we get her back right away or not. But I'm gonna go
Oh,
through some
there we
comments.
go. Okay, I had a
Is
call
is
come
it
in.
oh, okay? Is that StreamYard doing that to you or something else?
No, it's whenever anything comes through my phone, it's knocking me off. I haven't really dealt with this before. I'll have to figure this
Okay,
out in the future.
no worries. Uh,
Um, okay, so I was coming out of Costco and I looked out. It was wintertime, it was dark, and like people are like coming in, everyone's coming in. And all of a sudden I had this thought and I was like, we're just people. And it blew my mind. Like and it's interesting the way that you're phrasing this, the othering, there's sort of this undertone in it where you're talking about the harm done towards those we othered, that we weren't hearing them, we weren't open to who they were as humans, their story, their experience, the beauty, the goodness they bring. But there is such profound harm done to us because I remember feeling so isolated. Are you there?
yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I joined a homeschool hiking group that was not Adventist, shortly before I left the Adventist church. And I remember it was like the first day, all these homeschool moms, little kids get together, and it's like you're describing, looking around and going, okay, it's like these tiers, right? Who's Christian? Who's not? It's almost like, how saved are you? No one's my denomination, and so it's like, well, I probably should be witnessing. But then I always felt conflicted because it's like, first of all, it's a real dick move to witness to people. It just is. And I didn't want to lose friendships, and I didn't want to be witnessed to. And secondly, it's like, um it just felt wrong to say that somehow, I had the corner on God. I could always feel that. And so it's like, and I think this is just a huge point to make about Christianity, is there are so many, it puts us in these logical dichotomies where what our faith asks of us is illogical. And so what do you do with that?
Yeah. How did you respond when you began to see it?
Yeah, well, I guess we can go into my kind of the crux of my story here.
Well,
I got psychosis.
if we're going that direction, can I ask just real quick, how long for the timeline? How long were you fully in the Seventh Day Adventist Church in terms of from childhood on?
Um, from birth until the age of 33.
Okay, and how are you now?
I'm 36.
Okay,
So it's
so
just
you
been a
so
few
it's
years.
a few years. Okay, wow.
Yeah. Although I think I real my heart left at 31, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's the
I guess that's probably the story for a lot of us.
You're familiar with the PIMO expression?
I'm not.
PIMO, physically and mentally out.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
JWs, I think, use that one a lot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I've heard the term quiet quit.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and part of why I do what I do is because of what those 2 years were like. I had no idea what was going on inside of me. I tried for all I could to keep believing. But it's like I had just kind of suddenly gotten unbrainwashed. I peeked behind the curtain, and you can't unsee some things once you see them.
Did you feel like up until the point of your intense deconstruction, did you feel like you were enjoying your walk with God to a reasonable extent?
Oh man, what a loaded question.
I don't mean the church
Yes.
culture. I don't mean church culture and church. I mean just you and God. Like, just if you were to say, forget about what we do on missions trips, forget about what we do in our church culture, just you on your bed with an open Bible talking to God. Was that
Yeah,
good?
I mean, it was a huge part of my life. Looking back, it was obsessive, very. It was absolutely could be qualified as mental illness, OCD. Now I have words for it, religiosity or spiritual OCD for sure. It felt it felt both life-giving, that connecting with God, but there was always that uncertainty in me, really around being saved. uh, because it was like, I'm saved by, right? Because especially this like overcoming every sin thing that spilled over into obsessive thoughts that were like, um, they were like a toxin that polluted every experience of every day. If I took the kids to the park, was that the best way to teach them about Jesus? Were they associating with people who weren't Christian? Should I be reaching out to the other moms at the park? Should I be inviting them on an evangelism trip? If I fed the kids something, was that supporting their spiritual development? On and on and on and on. And it got to the point where I was like, I had incredibly obsessive thoughts about my own salvation. But then when I was married with kids, it's like, wow, what are the odds of me getting to heaven? What are the odds of all four of us getting to heaven? And it was terrifying. And then it spawns all of these controlling behaviors. Like, I remember my husband would be down in the basement working in his workshop. He was like remodeling our kitchen, and it's Sabbath, like Sabbath's coming on. It's Friday night sunset is when Sabbath starts. And I would be upstairs on the piano. I was a church pianist for 20 years. I don't even know I'm that old. And I'm like playing like this song, Day is Dying in the West, like loudly. So he'll get the hint that he needs to stop woodworking because it's Sabbath. Because I'm like, if he's woodworking on Sabbath, like, he is not going to be saved. So, then we just start policing everybody, because this is what this evangelism mindset does. It turns us into an entire surveillance system of control and policing.
Yeah, and it's amazing too when you talk about how that also goes back to you, like you were talking about how we other people and we're hurting them, but we're also hurting ourselves. But when you talk about the policing, it makes me think about like the idea that we're sort of in a prison, and there's a prison guard that's keeping us in prison, but we're also doing it to ourselves. Like we're both the
Yeah.
prisoner and the prison guard at the
And the
same
prison
time.
guard, correct.
Like it's a
Yes.
weird thing where like and eventually, like again, if you really get into this stuff, you take pride because when you jump through enough hoops and you win, you win the game, you get the award, you
Yes.
get the gold medal.
Yes.
You want to keep doing this. You want to keep repressing yourself and denying yourself because you get that dopamine hit of like, well done, my good and faithful
Yeah.
servant. Nice job.
Yes.
You are spiritually
Yeah.
going to the next level.
You're hitting on exactly, how I would define that kind of season in my life where it's like, yeah, I was almost, I don't know, in a way like trauma bonded or something with God, where it's like, yeah, there was always those like dopamine hits. I felt like I was the Christian, like the Adventist. I was like that girl. I was putting on the health seminars. I was super skinny. I was teaching the kids Sabbath school class. I was the church pianist. I was in with God. And I will say, like, if you want to phrase it this way, like we would have, my heart was in the right place, but I was toxic AF and I was suffering. But at the time, it's like the suffering itself gives you the dopamine hit. I wrote a Facebook post recently. I feel like one of my most insightful posts. I mean, it even just really struck me that it blew my mind really when I realized this. Okay, think about in nature. If you have, say you have, I don't know, do wolves eat rabbits? We'll say wolves eat rabbits. You've got a rabbit and a wolf. Think about instinct, because the church trains our instinct out of us. It's one of the worst things that religion does. Okay, wolf is chasing rabbit. And rabbit is like, oh no. So what can rabbit do? Rabbit can run away. Rabbit can duck in its hole and hide. Rabbit can lay over and play dead. Um, it's instinct. So when we are in church, we are taught to run towards the thing that's hurting us, whether that might be the church board that wants to discipline us, or like sacrificing your life for Jesus, or paying 10+% of your income to the church so that God will bless you. No, Satan never needed tithe to do his work, only God needed tithe. But the thing that harms you, the self-sacrifice, whatever it is, you're taught to go towards that. And there's a dopamine hit connected with it, because your brain is wired to believe that this is God's will for you, that you're good and holy. Now, if you do the intuitive thing, the instinctual thing, that a wolf is chasing you, which is a lot of this religious teaching is harmful, and you do the intuitive thing, which is to leave, you're backsliding. Satan's tempting you. It's a salvation issue. It's a spiritual issue, on and on and on. And so there's a psychological punishment to doing the intuitive thing. So what happens is when our brains, it's like crossing the wires in the brain. It's like crossing the hot and cold in your sink. If you're in the church, you're suffering because you are actively being harmed while you also have a dopamine hit going on. And if you leave all this harm from the church, you are suffering psychologically, but you're also protecting yourself from the harm. And so there's no way to get out. And this is a lot. Honestly, I feel like most people who come to me have already kind of gotten past that point, but sometimes those layers are in our subconscious mind. And even though we've left the belief system of the church, there's still this ping ponging inside of us that feels some level of guilt. And it cannot even be conscious guilt. It's like your body carries guilt or fear because you're not doing God's will. And it is the ultimate double fuck because whether you're in or out, you're suffering.
Yeah. It's so disconnecting from we get so splintered in this, and it's hard for me to honestly see all the ways that this stuff did its damage to me. At least it was at first when I first deconstructed.
Mm-hmm.
But as I go on and talk to people like you that I appreciate so much, people like you coming on, because you help us get the language and the word pictures for what's going on, and it takes us deeper steps into the shadow work of it all. But you get to a point where you're like, this really did get me to a point where I was not myself. And I think I was saying this in an earlier interview, that you realize that in many ways you have not been able to get to the point of accepting yourself and feeling okay in your own skin, and certainly not loving yourself. But it's also like an issue of like, you can't really love yourself if you don't know yourself, or at least you can't love yourself well if you don't know yourself well. And a lot of us feel like our identities were stolen and we don't know really who we are. And so a lot of this isn't just, oh, it's the religious trauma of I was taught I was wicked, or I was taught to not trust myself, or I was taught that God was going to judge me and he's seeing my thoughts. Like, all that stuff is true, but at the core of it all, I think a lot of us are going back and saying it was deeper than these one-off parts of the doctrine. It was an entire well-orchestrated machine that basically got us to a point of becoming I don't know what the right word is to use, but a Stepford wife Christian. Our minds were checked at the door, but it was at an age before we had any chance to object, any chance to think carefully about it, any chance to say, where did this religion even come from? And a lot of us are I think going through waves of trauma recovery, where we're first saying, oh my God, purity culture got me. Oh my God, the worm theology got me. This was awful. But then we're stepping back and saying, no, it's not just like one little circle of my life, of my psychology. Like, this was comprehensive. And we're going deeper to the point of saying, I'd like to get to know myself. And I use the illustration a lot of when I went to a group called New Tribes Mission, which is a group that does tribal church planting and Bible translation, tribal evangelism, and sort of like Wycliffe Bible translators, if you're familiar with them. But I was trying to do that as my life goal was to go plant a church in the jungle. And I did take some steps toward that, but didn't end up doing it full time. But basically, they put you through a lot of training. And one of the things that they train you on extensively before you could ever do missions work with them is what they consider a difference of belief versus worldview. And your belief is what you actively say, I believe. I believe in this. I believe in God the Father Almighty. I believe in the Trinity. I believe in whatever. Mary was a virgin. I believe in, the story of the Bible. But your worldview is what you actually believe. And you can't honestly sometimes tell what it actually is. And I use this illustration because I think it's a powerful one. If you were to say in Christianity, do you have worth before God? Do you have worth? And you'd say, well, of course, I was a sinner, but God saved me. He rescued me. I'm a child of the King. I have infinite worth because of God. That's your belief system. And the story I use is, one time I had this piano teacher, wonderful man. And it was, no one else had signed up for that hour of the piano teaching lesson at this Bible college. And he could have canceled, but he said, no, that's fine. I'll meet with just you. We'll just do one-on-one. And so every week I'd meet with this piano teacher at the school, and we'd do one-on-one piano lessons. And one day he says, Tim, I want you to turn your piano off. I want to talk to you. You're struggling with something. And I really was. I mean, he went through like 10 different questions. And by the end of it, he said, I want to ask you one final question. said, "You feel absolutely worthless, don't you?" And I mean, I just started bawling. And it's like that's a crisp example of the difference. Is your belief system that you're worthy and you have worth? Of course, I have excellent worth before God. Well, how do you feel? Tell me the truth. Do you feel worthless or not? Oh, I feel utterly worthless. And those 2 are different
Oh,
to the point that you would
yeah.
say, I don't know myself. And in many ways, the
Yeah.
worldview, I like to personify it a little bit and kind of say, and I'm working on a project to do this in a little bit of a poetic way, but to say it's almost like your worldview is like your childhood, like the shadow work level of like your childhood personality that's just waiting to talk to you and say, "Can we please have a conversation?" And they've been asking, and we have not had the ears to hear them. And it's like when
Mhm.
we deconstruct, it's like we finally start to hear a little whisper and eventually the actual
Mhm.
conversational little tone of them saying, "Look, I'm your worldview, and I've actually been pulling all the strings. I've been punching all the buttons, and I've been trying to tell you we need to talk and change some things, but you haven't heard me because you don't even see me. Can you see me now? Because we have a lot to talk about." And I feel like that's where a lot of us are getting to. Our worldviews have a lot of conversation to have with our belief system, and we have a lot of changing to do, really, or at least a little getting in getting in touch with our childhood self and saying,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
where did this come from? But who am I? And in some ways, this is about reparenting and just. I'll just say this and shut up.
Mhm.
I love the idea of picturesquely trying to have a conversation in your heart of hearts that says, I want to kind of pretend that I can go back in time and talk to my 7-year-old self and like
Mhm.
really have a heart to heart conversation. And even though we can't do that, it's like you can sort of pretend enough to sort of go back and do a little healing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I
You
don't know if that
said
makes
that
sense at all.
so beautifully. No, that I can tell you've been in this space a while. That gosh, I was so many things to react to on that, but um yeah, we were denied the opportunity to develop and discover who we are in normal ways. Again, think about nature. Think about this flower. Nothing made this flower become an orchid. Like it just grew. Given the right circumstances, it grew into an orchid. But in Christianity, we are forced into this box, this image of the type of music we're supposed to listen to, the type of clothes we're supposed to wear, the type of thoughts we're supposed to think, the type of person we're supposed to marry, where we're supposed to live, what we're supposed to do, on and on and on and on. And yeah, when you come out, if this has been your whole life, where do you even start? And this is where I say it's kind of like peeling an onion, because the first thing you have to get through is that feeling of maybe it's sinful or wrong to even get to know who I am, or maybe parts of who I am are wrong. Maybe there's parts of it we can accept. Like for me, I started wearing makeup. We couldn't wear makeup, and I could accept that. But maybe there's parts like of our sexuality that there's a lot more taboo around. And so it takes a while to even get that curiosity, to get that insight to say, no, this is programming to be shunning parts of my sexuality. This programming. This is not normal human behavior. Or I remember kind of when I switched frames from thinking about everything through the lens of sin, or did God approve or disapprove of this, and switching into reality or cause and effect. Like in Christianity, it's almost as though like being gay and being a pedophile are the same thing. It's not the same thing. One causes harm to children, and the other is consensual adults, or hopefully consensual adults. Um, so it's like it's layer by layer. But yeah, I think, once you can get to that point to realize, okay, a huge part of your identity, or your opportunity to find your identity, has been taken away from you. And now I am open and ready, and I am ready to be curious and accept what my identity is. That's like a crux. That is the turning point on the journey, and you are well on your way. I loved what you are describing here, that we are born, and I'm going to put this in my own words. We are born with our beliefs, or as who we are, with our identity, the things that we like or don't like, what we're passionate about, what we stand for, what we can't stand. we're born with that, just like how a flower is what it is from the beginning. It just simply grows into what it is. Um, and actually, I soon I'm going to be working in my business and doing guided reflections or meditations, whatever you want to call it. But like where you close your eyes and you go and meet your inner child and say, "What would you like to say to me?" Because there's that voice inside of us that is, it's us. It's just us that never really got to speak. So now we get that opportunity to be the parent and say, "Hey, what would you like to say?" I would say the most profound piece of the work I do with my clients now, um, and it's cool being on this journey as a coach and the things that I'm learning. Every time I'm with a client, I'm learning. What I have found is that our past is never in our past. It lives in our body. It lives in our body as that choking feeling in your neck, your pounding heart, the butterflies in your stomach. Maybe we call it anxiety, you know, indigestion, whatever you call it. Those are our emotions. And our emotions they live as a felt sensation in our body. Sometimes they don't always show up. Religion dissociates us from the feelings of our body. It actually shrinks our anterior insula. The part of our brain that picks up sensation from our body shrinks because our body carries a lot of very negative emotions in high control religion. So to protect us, it shrinks. So we work with becoming aware of the little feelings and sensations in our body. It actually regrows your anterior insula. Um, but each one of those sensations holds a story, a truth from our childhood. And so in my work, we start out with, telling our story of our life, but then we're going to drop into the body. Where are these sensations? And I want to speak to that sensation directly. That place in your chest that feels like it's squeezing. What does it have to say? I had a client with like numb arms. Just a few weeks ago, talking with this guy, and he held this belief that he had to defend himself with his arms, or he had to work and earn money. And it was so much anxiety around what could his hands do? What could his arms do? And we go back, what are the stories? Where did this come from? And we hear from that young child. It one time recently it hit me and it kind of blew my mind. We are this whole collection of our entire lives. Inside of us, there's the young child that's maybe rowdy, but it's a truth teller. There's the teenager that's angry, that's pissed, and that teenager protects us. That teenager has wisdom, and that teenager is sexual. Maybe that teenager's never gotten to express its sexuality. Um, and then there's our adult that's composed and put together, and maybe it's the wise parent. And then there's something ancient in us. There's this wise sage, this older an elder of the tribe, almost that higher wisdom from our older self. But what hit me is this: our youngest parts, those small child parts, they are our oldest parts. They have been with us the longest. And because of that, they carry an untarnished wisdom when we take the time to tune in.
Amazing stuff. This is truly the shadow work that we need to be moving towards.
Powerful word, shadow work.
Yeah, I am on the fringe of understanding it all, but it has become basically my my major life goal at the moment, I might say. I wanted to just make a quick comment and then ask you to go back to your story a little bit. But you were talking about the body trauma. I remember one of the interviews I think I did in the first year of doing this channel. I've been doing this now for about 6 years, but one of the interviews, this lady was from a very fundamentalist version of evangelicalism, where ladies were not allowed to wear pants. It was as simple as just like this. It's not a salvation issue. It's just a religious cultural thing. Women wear dresses at all times. And she was talking about her deconstruction, and she said it literally was so intense that the first time she gave herself permission to just wear a simple pair of pants, not talking about something like a low cut shirt with cleavage, not talking about skinny this or a bikini, just basic jeans, just pants. She was shaking because of the trauma and the shame of it. It's amazing. But if you want to comment on that, feel free. But I also wanted to ask you if you could to take us back to take us back to the time when you actually said, Houston, we have a problem. I do not know that I believe this stuff anymore. What was it like to actually make that escape?
Yeah, so on the note of this lady that had this just bodily reaction to wearing pants. Okay, that's huge. So we're talking about the nervous system here. So when we go through our entire life, our body keeps the score. It clocks experiences and it makes note of what's safe or not safe, what gets us connection to those we love, what gets us belonging, approval. And our body will sabotage us from doing things that aren't safe. It's a survival mechanism. And so what happens is grow up in these religious environments. Our body can embody a reaction to wearing pants because what would have happened if we wore pants? And so when we go into this body-based work to hear from, your pounding heart or hear from the squeezing in your throat, part of it is hearing from it, but part of it is name it to tame it, and healing happens by feeling. So we do this work to loosen the blocks because these blocks, they're real and they are embedded and printed into your nervous system like computer code to keep you safe as a fundamentalist. But guess what? Now you're not a fundamentalist. You're a fully functioning free adult. And yet your body will continue to sabotage you as though you're a fundamentalist. I just had a client I think a week or two ago. She grew up in a cult in India. It was a fascinating story. Um, but she was, I don't want to share too much and I won't share her name, but she was wanting to step into a new life experience that she placed a lot of value around that she felt like would give her fulfillment. But she also almost felt an anxiety, like a drive towards that, needing to do that. But every time she would approach it, she would shut down with like fear and spiraling thoughts. And we went back into her story and say, hey, well, you were taught this about that type of experience, and it cost you these actual stories. It cost you here, here, here. Okay, so your nervous system is blocking you from being able to do that. I felt that when I launched my business. I felt my nervous system wanting to just keep me small. I shouldn't speak. So, how do we clear the nervous system to let us move in the direction of the life we want? Because when this nervous system trauma is so dense, it will find a way to sabotage us every time until we work directly with the subconscious mind and the body to let us move forward.
Hmm. Amazing stuff. What Go
Um,
back to your story, could you also share with us
yeah.
what was it like when you actually left? Because that to me is such a pivotal part of people's stories because it's so hard. It's so easy to connect the dots and say, I need to change my theology a little bit. I need to learn more about apologetics. I need to tweak this. I need to seek God's face. But to actually have the bravery and even for some of us, it was just took the academics to study stuff, but the bravery and the information
Mhm.
to say, you know what, I'm not sure I actually believe this stuff anymore. Like, what was that final part of the journey like for you?
Mhm. To kind of try to do a high level here. So, year 2021, 2018, my husband was diagnosed with a nearly fatal leukemia, spent a month in Hopkins. He got discharged 2 days before my first daughter was born via C-section. We were doing a full house remodel and we were both suddenly unemployed. Um, 2019, I got pregnant with my second daughter. 2020, we all know what happened. COVID hit. Unemployed again. And I gave birth to my second daughter. I was isolated. I was terrified of the end of times. I was raising a toddler who has some special needs and a newborn. And I was struggling. I was sleep deprived. I was hitting insomnia, anxiety, in addition to the investigative judgment and all of these sinless perfection type of thoughts. Bundle that all up together. I would say this, in many ways, I'm one of the strongest people I've ever known. And so it's like when I say I hit a breaking point, it was so much. Uh, where do we even go? I started to see, I started to learn about abuse. It's interesting. I certainly knew the word abuse, but it's kind of given to us, I think, especially in Christianity, that abuse is physical abuse. And you're not taught about emotional or psychological abuse. The thing that absolutely blew my mind, first, I started to see some abuse dynamics in relationships I was in. But then I realized I was the guard of the prison I was in. The abuse lived in me. It was the voices inside of me. It was the theology. It was my own thoughts, my own worldview that was abusing me. So I started to see all of this, but at the same time, I had just such severe insomnia, such demands from the childcare, on and on. I checked myself into the psych ward. Um, and that was the most life changing thing, really, in a positive sense, that ever happened. With my background in nursing, it was terrifying to me going down, down the hall in the wheelchair. I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. But I went in thinking, oh, God sent me here to witness to everyone and save everyone. And actually, I had some man, this is a whole thing we could get into. Some point I'll write a book. I had some weird experiences there that to this day I struggle to explain. There was a guy there named Mark. I was sitting in the windowsill one day and Mark came to me shaking and he's like, "Who do I look like? Who do I look like?" He's a young guy. And I was like, "You look like Jesus?" Because he did. And he's like, "Yeah, there's a reason. I came here to talk to you." He's just one of the other patients. He's like, "You're going to change the world, but you got to knock off this religious bullshit or you aren't going to do anything." And I was like, "What?" But it landed and I was like, I think what Mark just said matters. Um there was another guy, I was sitting down on that windowsill. This guy's name was Gavin. And he's like, "Hi, I knew you were coming. We all knew you were coming. I saved you room 1 cuz you're the one." And I'm like, "What does this mean?" And he's like, "You're going to change the world through love." And he's like, "You know the butterfly effect? If a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, it makes ripples that spread across the world." And so different people were saying stuff like this to me, and I'm trying to make sense of it because they're all kind of saying the same thing. And I'm like, well, maybe this is just general. Maybe they say this to everyone, or maybe they're like in cahoots with each other somehow. They're talking. Well, one day I was probably a weekend. I was at group. If you know the psych ward, it's like there's a room. We've got tables. We go to group and talk, kind of like group therapy. New admit comes in, young girl. She's probably 25. She just walks in off the street. Has not spoken to any of us. They send her in a group. She comes to the door. I'm not planning on sharing all this tonight. I still can't totally make sense of this. She looks around the table like she's looking for someone and her eyes land on me and she goes, "You, I knew I'd found you here. I'd find you here. I came here looking for you." And she's like, "You're going to change the world through love, but you got to knock off your religious crap." And I was like, "What?" Um and I had a lot of insights in the psych ward, just normal stuff, like the fact that mental illness seems to be deeply connected with trauma. And I thought it was, I didn't know why people had mental illness even as a nurse. And it's like, wow, these people have been through so much. And in my mind I was like, everybody here has these wild stories, like homicide in the family and homelessness and profound alcoholism, just abuse. And I'm like, but not me. Like I'm from the upper crust middle class. I don't have trauma. No. But then, later I got to thinking, I'm like, wait, what? And when I started realizing, oh my gosh, I have really deep trauma, but it's so invisible. To this day, it feels very dramatic to me to talk about having a lot of trauma in my life because it's so invisible. It is that subtle emotional control, manipulation, gaslighting, the religious pressure, the coercive control, all of this. And yet the trauma, it can be invisible. You can have this great life, but the trauma can be off the charts. And the biggest trauma is the voice in your own mind. Um, so I started realizing that, the church shames alcoholism and drug addiction and all of this stuff. And I'm like, these are just coping mechanisms. Some people just don't have access to all the other stuff we do. And I started realizing people are just trying to do the best they can. Like everyone's out here just trying to make it. And I started realizing like this moral superiority stuff is not helping anybody. People need someone to listen to their story. And I realized that there. We did not have a therapist in the psych ward. So I took it upon myself to listen to people's stories. And I ate dinner by myself and I told them they could come eat with me one at a time. And I would just tell them your story makes sense. You make sense. And they'd like get better. They weren't aggressive anymore and they were getting discharged. Now I hope they did follow up with a therapist or whatever after that, stay on their meds. But I was like, people just need to be heard. And this just challenged everything I thought, and when looking back, because I had somewhere between a postpartum psychotic break or a manic episode that was stress related. I was plunged into my subconscious mind. If anyone's been on a mushroom trip, I personally haven't, but my experiences, I think is quite similar, where you kind of like become aware of all this repressed stuff, old beliefs or whatever, and you're like analyzing and reviewing it. It's a little crazy. It's almost like putting a cassette tape on rewind, like like editing your whole brain. But when I stabilized after that, the church didn't make sense to me anymore. It was like I could see through it. And I've had people go like that done mushroom trips, and they come out and say this, and they're like, it's like they made a caricature of the whole point, where you're like, if the whole point is about love, or even I still consider myself a Jesus follower, the way of Jesus, of open-hearted acceptance, of love, of community, of union. These are principles I live by. That picture doesn't stack with the church, certainly not the church I was in. And so now I've got suddenly, I say it felt like I was walking through a forest, big, beautiful, lush trees. I felt very comfortable in my Adventist life, more or less. And it's like a forest fire came through and everything just burned down. And now I'm sitting in the rubble going, what just happened? And I remember during these kind of 2 years I was still in the church. Um, there was a lady who had breast cancer, and she did like a Friday night vespers thing, and she had been healed, she got over her breast cancer, and she's like, I couldn't figure out why God allowed this to happen. And then I realized he allowed it to happen so that he could heal me, so that I could glorify him. And I about vomited. I was like, that stuff Hitler did. You cause trouble so that you can fix the trouble you cause, so that people can see you as the savior who fixes the problem that you caused. And I said this to a handful of my closest friends. I was like, this is so upsetting to me. And they were just like, they were like, well, Kristi, I think like it's like Satan's tempting you or something. It's like, they're very worried. It's like gosh, it's oh, what is that story? I can't think of it now. Where this guy grows up in the fake bubble. Truman Show.
Yep.
I was seeing the edge of reality, right? I was seeing the cracks of the set, and they're scared. And so the more you ask, the more they just try to suck you in. But another question I ask is like, okay, the sinless perfection, is it me changing my character to become sinless, or is it Jesus changing? Because I'm always told, in myself lives no good thing. I can't do anything of myself, yet not I, but through Christ in me. And yet I find myself still sinning and not perfect. So then is it my fault or Jesus' fault? Because if I'm not the one who can do it, only Jesus can do it. Then if I'm not perfect, maybe you can say I'm not praying enough or repenting enough or something, but like, no, I'm doing this to the nth degree. At this point, it's Jesus' fault. And that doesn't make any sense. I just saw cracks, cracks, cracks. I remember seeing like a Noah's Ark thing on the nursery bathroom wall at church, and it was like, Mommy was putting Jimmy to bed one night, and Jimmy said, Mommy, what about all the kids who didn't make it on the ark that drowned? And Mommy said, Yeah, Jimmy, that's why you need to follow God. And Jimmy went to bed really thinking about how important it is to give your heart to Jesus or something. I'm like, this is terrifying. Like we have like a genocidal God. Um, so I finally, my first place to process was a Facebook deconstruction group, and I joined at midnight alone, and I like hid it from my Facebook wall because I couldn't have anyone seeing over my shoulder, that I'm questioning. And I remember the first thing is they're cracking jokes about the flood, and I'm like, it felt like sacrilegious, and I really liked it. So I'm like, but it was real. Y'all have a genocidal God who also regrets the mistakes he's made, who also knows everything it makes no sense. But at that point I felt like I was trying to salvage a view of God. And I will say to this day, these kind of like synchronistic experiences I had in the psych ward are probably a big part of why I would consider myself more agnostic and less atheist. Um, I deeply sense that there's a mystery. There's more going on. The nature of that, I am agnostic to. Um, Part of how I got the main reason I got into religious trauma coaching is because I had a dream. where it was as though I was shown my life purpose. Okay, was that something outside of me showing me, or just my own subconscious mind kind of saying, like, hey, based on your personality and your interests, like this might be, I don't know. And I am at peace with not needing to know. Um, I think for most of us probably in this space, you realize you're trading knowing everything, having all the answers. You're trading that certainty for what at first feels like uncertainty, but then it turns into curiosity and being comfortable with not knowing. There's so much we can't know. We can't know these things. So can you find more freedom and room to breathe and space in the unknowing? So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of deconstruction. I remember summer of 2023, I was the VBS director at church, and I remember sitting on my porch swing just prior to VBS starting and thinking, I'm an atheist and I'm leading VBS.
Oh, no.
I put someone else in charge of all the Bible stuff, and I'd like have my eyes open during prayer, and I'm like, I can't, but I tried. I did CPR on my faith for 2 years, read the Bible, read all these Ellen White books, and the more I read, it was just bullshit. Like I could see all the programming, the control. I could see all the ways that money was going to power, and the way it created fear. I remember thinking, I don't know if this end time stuff is correct. Like I don't know if it's going to happen. But I remember realizing the concept of unfalsifiability. I can't prove that it won't. So they can just keep saying it will. I can't prove that Jesus won't come again. So they can just keep saying that he will. But instead of, so it's like I couldn't say that it wouldn't happen, but I could say that it was harming me. The fear was harming me. So I'm not going to engage thoughts or beliefs that cause me harm over things I cannot control. So that was like, it's just loosen, loosen, loosen. A huge point for me was essentially coming out to my husband. And at that point, we're taking it one piece at a time. I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure about, the Adventist church. And to his credit, well, he dove into studying it. At first he thought he was going to like convince me it was correct. And 2 days in, he's a smart guy. He's like, yeah, points for the home team. It's bad. um, so then 6 weeks, he and I did a deep dive just kind of on the history of the Adventist church, Ellen White, all this stuff, and even studying the Bible too. It was really more comparing it to the Bible. And he and I both in 6 weeks were like over and out. My father-in-law was the head elder at our church, a large church. And leaving the Adventist church was one of the most horrific experiences of my life. Um, I think mostly because both of our families, and we both have kind of large families, are so deep into it. Um, I have a very strained, if not entirely absent, connection from my family now because of leaving. Kind of like you might think with leaving the Amish faith. And there's so much of my story I can't tell, and maybe I never will be able to tell. But it was incredibly traumatic. So when we left the Adventist church, we bounced into a couple different evangelical churches, kind of looking for something else. And like one thing about the Adventist churches, they don't have the power that this, kind of Christian nationalist, right wing, evangelical system has, because they are kind of a small culty fringe movement. So when I jumped into evangelicalism, I didn't just leave Adventism because of theology. I left it because of abuse, because of psychology. And I saw it in evangelicalism. In many ways, it was worse. The oppression of women was worse because we had an Adventist prophet. I used to preach sermons in my church, not irregularly. I could teach, I could whatever. I couldn't be a pastor. Some places you could. But in evangelicalism, it's like total oppression and subjugation of women, objectification of women. Um, they're just bashing gays from the pulpit. And even at that point, I was almost like, okay, have your perspective, but like STFU, what are we doing? This is a Sunday service. Like, what? No. And I actually dated a guy in college. My best friend, turned out he was gay, and he was trying to pray the gay away. But he has become a very close friend of mine again since then, 15 years later. And my policy was like, if he couldn't feel just as comfortable in this church as me, then this church is not safe for me or for anyone. If there are conditions to belonging, this is not the table of Christ. This is not the place where I want to be. This is not in alignment with who I am. So I ended up I found a small church in our local community. that actually truly was like affirming, and they believed in equal roles of women, and just as far as the Christian community goes, very healthy. I think over time, I more and more felt like there was still kind of this push for evangelism or bringing people in to know Jesus. And I'm like, no, my values are for each person to live their best life, to be a thriving, blossoming human. And I started to see more and more that a lot of people were much happier not going to church, and it just came to be why. It's like, and again, if you can get to that point where, hey, salvation is just, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved, then why are you doing this every Sunday? Why are you sending money over there? Why do we need to get everybody else in here? Maybe they like it, maybe they like the music, maybe they like the company, whatever. And I more and more just started to see the machine of Christianity. And it just made less and less sense until, I got into kind of eschatology, and I call Daniel and Revelation Plato now, where it's like, okay, we have all these ideas of the end times, and the underpinnings of rapture theology are so shoddy, such a new teaching. Original sin was not taught by the church fathers, even. It was one certain guy who had sexual issues and wanted to blame it on his sin nature, distorted like one single verse. And so now we've made evangelicalism based around these kind of 8 bullet points. And even just from a purely biblical perspective, they're bullshit. But then when you want to look at the Bible, and I started asking a different question. Instead of saying, are these beliefs biblical? I started saying, is this group harming me? Are these thoughts harming me, or are they helping me? Are these beliefs harming me? Who am I as a person? What does it mean to be ethical? I started realizing something I call intrinsic or extrinsic morality. Christianity teaches an ethical code outside of you. And whenever we as humans have an ethical code, a list of expectations outside of us, we want to rebel. It is in the nature of humans. We want to twist it. So, like, a perfect example is Christians doing terrible things and asking forgiveness because they're like manipulating the rules. When we have intrinsic morality, this is who I am as a person. I care for the widows and the orphans. I am on behalf of the oppressed. I am on behalf of gay rights. I am on behalf of goodness and justice and equity. In a lot of ways, to an extent, the same sort of set of moral principles you might find in a Christian or a progressive Christian. But it's not coming because the Bible told me so. And I'm not looking for loopholes. It's who I am. It is a wild thing. Like, I've helped walk Christians through this to say, because they're like, hey, if you leave Christianity, how are you going to be moral? I'm like, no. And this, Timmy Gibson will say this. He's like, I'm more moral now that I'm not a Christian. And I have found that for myself too, because
Yep.
this is who I am. It's not something outside of me. So yeah. And then I think probably just around a couple of years ago, one night I had some different thoughts hit me, like, what is truth? Well, truth is this kind of hot button word going in a cult. Like, we have the truth, we have present truth. Ellen White had the truth. And then I was like, no, truth means something that actually is. It's actual factual. And everything that was given to me as truth, it's invisible, it's ideas, it's truth claims. Even the Bible, really, it's a truth claim. These are stories, these are ideas, they're concepts. But truth means something that actually is. And I think in that moment I was like, I'm not a Christian. And it's not to say I don't hold value in the teachings of Jesus, or many of these concepts that were given to us in the church. But this system, this framework, this structure, these bullet point beliefs, I'm not that. I am on behalf of humans. I am on behalf of morality. I am on behalf of human flourishing. And anything else that comes into my life via the form of religion or a life purpose, it is held up by the standard of who I am as a person. I do not subject who I am as a person to the demands of a system.
I always like to sort of half joke when we talk about the question of, did you lose your morality, and, where do you get your morality from? That really, it's like you could really say it like this. You're right, Christians. You're right. Now that I have walked away from a book that taught me genocide and land theft and slavery and child brides and stoning and genital mutilation, now that I've lost all that stuff, you're right. My morality is apparently completely gone. It's like
Yes.
you all do not hear yourselves. Like you just cannot get past the nose in your face. Listen to
Yeah.
yourselves. You're literally shooting yourselves in the foot the more you talk. And in some ways, I almost applaud them. Like keep talking because there's people around you deconstructing, and they'd like to hear from the atheist side and from the Christian side. And the more you talk, the stupider you sound. So keep
Yes.
talking. It's like as much as we hate what Trump is doing to our country and our world, it's like the more he talks, the more people are escaping Christianity. It's like he's
Yes.
doing our
I
fucking
call
job
it
for us.
popping the pimple. Because all this badness has been there, but it's getting exposed.
Yeah,
The system is getting exposed.
yeah, exactly. And it's sad what's going on, but they're in some ways doing our job for us, despite the
Yeah,
toxicity of the
100%.
methodology.
Yep.
When you got to that point where and by the way, I see a bunch of comments coming. We will be getting to your comments probably in about 5 or 10 more minutes. So thank you for letting us. We're just going to get through the bulk of the story here. But could you just take us to the point where, at that point, once you are out, once you've said, "I don't believe this," what was the first few weeks and months like? Once you said that, was it traumatizing to think stuff like, for example, what if there's no heaven or hell, and what if there's no like safety net? Like I thought God kind of had a story in mind. He was like, even when there's bad things that happen,
Mhm.
he's kind of got me. He's
Mhm.
going to undergird me and take the years that the locusts have eaten and restore them. He's going to
Mhm.
turn, he's Romans 8:28. He's going to turn everything for good. And all of a sudden, I think there's no storyteller here, and there's no one protecting me. There's no angels protecting me from the demons or from bad stuff, and just so much kind of falls through the net. The house of cards falls pretty intensely for a lot of us, especially like you said earlier, when you're fully in it and you really, really, really believe. It's like everything collapses. And as much as in some ways for a lot of us, I think we would say that was the moment of intense freedom and like,
Mhm.
wow, like I'm free of all this mythology, I'm free of all this toxicity. At the same time, it's still kind of like it's sad in that it's like a funeral. Like the year I deconverted was
Mhm.
2019. I deconverted in September of 2019, like fully deconverted. But my own father had died that year in January of 2019, and it was interesting parallel to me to think, at my dad's funeral in January of 2019, nobody would have come into that church service as we're all mourning and saying our last respects. Nobody would have come in there and said, "What are you all doing? What are you doing? Why are you sad? Why are you this? Why are you that?" Like, what in the world? Just go live your life. Everyone would have been, of course, very respectful and said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry, for your pain. I'm sorry he went through this thing. What can I do for you? I'm here for you." Of course, in church, a lot of them I'm praying for you. But then when that's what everyone would do with their, fairly normal at a funeral, is respect the grief that you're going through. But when you say to them, "I am going through effectively what is a funeral for my heavenly Father, who is arguably
Uh-huh.
much more important,"
Uh-huh.
at the moment when you are grieving it and hurting, the Christians basically come up to you at your arguably lowest point of your life in some ways. I mean, it's the best part of your point of your life
Yes.
and the worst, the best of times, the worst of times, all at the same moment.
Yes.
But they're basically like, "Hey, Mr. Atheist, fuck you." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Can I please just grieve my heavenly Father? I know he's not there. I know I'm grieving a ghost. I'm grieving a nothing. I'm grieving a cipher. But please, it was a cipher that meant the world to me for 43 years.
Mhm.
Can I please
Mhm.
cry it out?" And
Mhm.
they get so upset at you, and it's amazing to me how this works. What was it like for you when you said, "I'm done"? What were the next few steps?
Yeah, I think the trauma really was that moment we left the Adventist church, although there were so many like steps on the deconstruction journey. But they did this ricochet thing. Probably a lot of us felt this, where like on the one hand, they were like trying to like they kept like texting us happy Sabbath, and they'd be like, "We just want you to know," some of them, "We love you, we're praying for you, we accept you," the better ones. And then but then they would like ping to like I was invited on a girls' trip that was put on by my friend, not even by the church. And then, like, I think my father-in-law told her to uninvite me because it like gave the wrong impression or something. It's like the ping between loving witnessing, reaching out, and like shunning, isolating, and like hating. They couldn't even figure it out.
You're dangerous now.
Totally, totally. And they want to love me because that would be the Christ-like way. They can't figure out which it is. It's both. The guy in the sky. I just said to one of my atheist friends recently, I was like, there's no guy in the sky. And there's a part of me that every part of me believes there's no guy in the sky. And there's a part of me somewhere in there that thinks there's a guy in the sky irrationally. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like I don't believe that in any sense of the word. But like, yeah, it just feels like there's eyes up there watching me. Did I
Do you
lose you?
No,
Oh,
I
you're
wasn't
there.
sure if you were gonna keep going there. I didn't want to interrupt you, but
Oh, yeah.
do you mean that in the sense that like you're saying that he's not there, but you're just experientially, psychologically feel like he's still there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's probably like, gosh, it's an awful example, but like, imagine a family member died and you just think it's something in you feels like you're going to wake up the next morning and see them at the breakfast table. It's like that. It's very much like that. They're not there, but there's that piece of you that just like feels because they've been there. We believe they were there for so long. You still like feel it inside of you. I don't know. Anyway,
No, I
that's been its
completely
whole own thing.
I definitely agree with that. It feels like that, and in some ways, I would say that's part of the belief versus worldview thing that takes a while to heal from,
Oh
and
yeah.
not just the presence of God, but even just the dynamic of life. Like I've mentioned to people that I have identified, I think pretty accurately in my life, that my belief system is nihilism, but my worldview is not. And I've also acknowledged I don't want to change
Um,
that. I don't think anything matters, but I live as if every day really does matter. And that's residue from Christianity.
yeah.
Everything counts. And so I
You,
wake up every day saying, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to change, leave this world better than I
uh-huh.
found it. My
Uh-huh.
nihilism says, who the fuck cares? It doesn't matter. But
Are you familiar
I
with existentialism?
a little enough to be dangerous, but feel free to talk about it if you want to.
Essentially, you're describing existentialism. It's a form of nihilism. It's hopeful nihilism. So one time I saw a
Yeah.
meme that was a bus, two passengers on it. There's a guy in the front wearing black. He's really sad. Nothing matters. And it's like, oh, it's so. I remember one night horrific nihilism hitting me, or early on before I even went to the psych ward. Guy in the back of the bus, super happy, hands up, and he goes, woohoo, nothing matters. So then you get to create meaning. If none of this means anything, but again, I really do think, regardless of your belief system, if we are intellectually honest, the one thing that matters is love, which really just boils down to being a decent human. How could I show up to make a difference in the life of someone else or in my own life?
Yeah.
And then there's ultimate purpose and meaning in each moment, but not in some kind of existential sort of way. It's like this present moment, this moment is heaven. We make it heaven by bringing goodness, by creating goodness in this moment.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. But that I think that's a connection to your thought about God's not there, but it feels like he's still there in the sky. It's like
Yeah.
I feel like in some ways I don't pray, for example. I don't ask God for help in any way. I don't think there's anybody there. And I haven't for
Mhm.
years. And it's been wonderful to just realize like it's been years since I've even remotely thought like that. But at the same time, you feel like there's certain drivers there. And in some ways, I feel like that's part of the work that's yet to come is to say, are you still
Mm.
living in some ways as a Christian? And we've been talking on the channel a little
Mhm.
bit, and we're going to do more soon about
Mhm.
the idea of it's also an issue of not just that we need to heal from this stuff, but also the reality that so many of us are trying to heal from Christianity in Christian ways. And that even
Yes.
the filter is,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
The questions we're asking, the lens we're even looking, that this I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like one of the first questions we could ask is this biblical? Or what would God want me to do? And then the next question is this harmful? It's a more helpful question to ask. But that's a big jump. So yeah, it's so many layers of the onion. I'm gonna jump through these next question or points here because I know our time is wrapping up.
Sure.
A huge moment for me was deconstructing hell, as I think it was for many of us. And I just had a very interesting journey with this. Right after I got out of the psych ward, I suddenly was like, where did this teaching come from? Like, I knew my Bible so well, so well. And I was like, it doesn't really talk that much about hell. And yet we base our entire worldview on this dichotomy of heaven and hell. And I remember in college hearing in my mind over and over and over, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's like, what does this mean that Jesus said this? And I was like, okay. So I deep dove on hell for a whole week, like 40 hours. I looked up every word in Greek and Hebrew. This is how I studied my Bible. That's how they taught us to do it. And there's like 6 different words in Greek and Hebrew that all have different translations and meanings that all get merged into this English word hell. They mean different things, and you get into it. Like one's like a dumpster. Jesus is referring to a dumpster. One is like the underworld or the grave. One is like a place where demons go. It wasn't even a place where humans ever went. Some of it's like allegorical, like the lake of fire. But if you look at the lake of fire, and we want to say, if you want to call that like a literal hell, well, death got thrown into the lake of fire. First of all, and death dies at the end of Revelation. First of all, if you've got people who are dead or dying in hell, how? And secondly, you can't literally burn up death. So you've got a metaphorical thing being thrown into a literal fire, and also like the false prophet and the beast are thrown in. And it's like, man, when you read Revelation and realize they just dance back and forth between literal interpretation and symbolism, and everyone's got their own way of splitting it. But anyway, in that week, 2021, hell fell apart. And I was like, this is not biblical. Well, I started talking about that. And what do you know? The people in my life were like, oh, she's still psychotic. And so they were calling my psychiatrist and they put me on medications, more medications,
because you
because I
deconstructed
didn't
hell.
believe, because I deconstructed hell. Yes. And so
Yeah.
I figured out I had to be quiet about it. But then it was so traumatic. And like my own brain was like, well, then I was second guessing myself. Maybe this is just mental illness. Maybe I'm seeing something wrong. And I talked myself back into it. I talked myself back into believing in hell, kind of. But when we left the Adventist church 2 years later, almost the first thought that came back to me was like, what was that about hell again? And I went and I just got more into that. And then I got into like the history of it. And I was like, yeah, this is a new doctrine. Again, it's like newer on the scene of Christianity. And it really came into Christian thinking through the King James translation of the Bible, because the culture at that time of King James, first of all, they were slave owners, it was patriarchy, it was all this stuff, but they had a dualistic worldview. They had a heaven and hell. And so part of it's just functionality. Where this is my understanding of it. I'm sure I don't know all the details. When they're translating, all these 6 different Greek and Hebrew concepts, well, hey, we have to put them in English. There's no word for Gehenna and Sheol and Tartarus. So the closest thing is this one concept of hell. And gosh, but then it just gets exploited to control people and scare people. But I remember again when I was 16, I was on a mission trip in Mexico laying block on this church. And I said to the girl next to me, and I said, how can Christians really know if they love Jesus or they're just afraid of hell? And that was kind of like one of those harbingers that's like, and she did not shut it down. And I was like, if you have a whole system based on reward and punishment, how can it be about love? Or how could you know? So hell fell apart pretty early, but then that was a complicated journey because it kind of came back around. Well, what do you know? This new church that I started going to, the little church, come to find out that pastor was in the closet about a lot of stuff, but one being he didn't believe in hell either. And so he and I got to talking, and I'm like, oh, he doesn't believe in original sin. He doesn't believe in hell. He doesn't believe the Bible teaches it. He does not believe in end time eschatology. And I remember one time, but he was not really open about this stuff. His sermons, he'd kind of like walk a line, if that makes sense. Because he deconstructed I remember one time in the foyer, he said to me, he said, heaven isn't real, don't you? Like, we're not going somewhere. And it didn't even feel traumatic. I was just like, oh, of course, of course. And I think by that point, when all the other stuff had kind of fallen, that didn't feel like too big of a jump. But for me, I think maybe because of my background in neurobiology, my psychosis, definitely my psychosis, it's like, what was that? What is the subconscious mind? And so I started learning about the difference between, for lack of a better term, essentially the right and left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere is concrete, it's analytical, it's black and white, it's factual, it's a law keeping. The right hemisphere is creative, it's artistic, it's emotive, it's poetry, it's possibility, it's spiritual. We were given religion as a left hemisphere interaction, and we were taught to read the Bible through a left hemisphere lens of literalism. And it is very traumatic read through a literalistic Western mind lens. But the Western mind, this literal mind, this left brain centric mind, is again new in the history of the world. If you approach, and I'm not pro Bible. I don't have a Bible. I don't read my Bible. I don't encourage people to read their Bibles unless they're Christian. Then go read all of it. Um, if you approach the Bible through a right brain concept, or any other book, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever spiritual concept, look at it as emotive art. Look at it as the expression of humans trying to make sense of their world. Look at it as poetry, because that's what a lot of it is. It's not actual stories. I read a story of a missionary who was in this remote tribe, and he tells them the story of the flood, and they're like, "Oh, you mean the story of the big frog?" Then we have that story, and that blew my mind. And actually, I said this to my pastor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is the story of missionaries around the country. Like, so many of these core biblical stories are mythology. The story of the flood is mythology. It's meant to be understood as such. And the ancient mind would have understood it as such. I'm reading a book right now, Zealot, on the historical life of Jesus Christ. And if you look historically at the best that we can understand, which is quite a lot, the story of Jesus, as told us in the Gospels, is an interwoven narrative between truth and mythology. Now, for our minds, we might say, well, then it's fiction, it's false. Okay, that's objectively true, but the ancient mind would have read it as a mythological encounter, much as we would watch Lord of the Rings. So the Bible didn't necessarily die for me. Certainly, this concept of like a God in the sky, judgment, heaven and hell, all of that faded off. But I saw it more through the lens of, okay, what does it mean to be spiritual? And I love like Sam Harris's take on spirituality, on non-religious meditation, um, because I still think that the Bible, I mean, for me, what do I want to say? The Bible was both a pathway into Christianity, and in and of itself was my journey out of it. Like, I used the Bible to get out of religion. And I saw Jesus doing this. Like, he was giving the middle finger hard to religious folk. So the Bible still has value to me. I almost look at it as a psychological tool, when understood correctly, that puts to death religion. If you read the Bible chronologically, you go into this high control, kind of narcissistic, punitive God, and then you come to Jesus, who says, "Hey, my Father's about love." And actually, I yeah, the whole history of how the Bible was written, I don't think Jesus was saying that Yahweh was his father. This was like a belief system. It was one of the cosmology of the ancient tribes. And Jesus shuts down that way of being. Um, and there's a piece in me that's like, I know that I'm still on a journey myself. I think if you had me on here 3 months, I would be saying this in a different way. Like, I'm still unpacking all of this. But I think maybe because my deconstruction has happened piece by piece, most of it has felt far more liberating and less traumatic. I also think because the last couple of years I've been on this journey kind of with my pastor, he actually taught me to meditate. And I started to realize that what we experience as trauma is a felt sense in our body. It's a nervous system feeling. And so we try to resolve all of our life's problems, our anxiety, depression, whatever, by working with our thoughts. But a much more direct way is to work with our body, or we can practice stillness through meditation. You just make your brain like a lake in the morning. How do you get out of the realm of thought? How do you get out of that guilt, the shame spirals, whatever? And it's not even about meditating and connecting with God, it's just finding that inner tranquility. So now I do yoga, not as a spiritual practice. I do it every morning as a body-based practice. It has helped so much. I have almost no anxiety left. I had a new friend recently say to me, he's like, "Do you ever have a bad day? You don't, it doesn't seem like you ever have a bad day." And I thought about it. I'm like, I hadn't thought about that. No, I never do. I have bad moments, hard moments, but I've released the trauma from my body, my amygdala, the fear center of our brain that keeps us in these trauma loops. It gets inflamed. I've healed it. So we're not doing that anymore. Leaving the Adventist church was very traumatic. Just the whole community and all of that, and coming out to family. But aside from that, my experience has been much more liberating. And I think probably because of the work that I do and maybe my publicity online too, I've been able to build much healthier community pretty quickly too.
I love it. I love it. Good stuff. Well, I do want to save a minute at the end to just sort of talk about your platform and your coaching and what you do. But before we do, if you're okay with it, I want to take a quick side break here to look at the comments. Is that okay if we go through them real quick?
100%.
So went through a few of them before. Let's see here. Jonathan, Jonathan, thank you again so much for your super chats that we talked about earlier. Really appreciate your support. God wants to be the master of your life, just like a narcissist. Yeah. And by the way, I'll go through these quickly, Kristi, but just jump in if there's anything you wanted to respond to more than just a quick word. I'm glad for you to take over. Alex says, I didn't even understand other religions until I was older. Yeah, a lot of us were kept from that. It was just either irrelevant or it was considered a sort of a poison. Yeah, we're Satan's church. I always hated that command. I make sure to keep it unholy as possible now. Yeah. Like big brother with the self-policing. I guess that's what home groups are for. I think some of this was from specific topics we were on earlier, so I may forget exactly where we were. But hey, Cold Iron Gaming, great to see you. Well said, Tim. We were the prisoners and the prison guards. Yeah. It's often time still stuck in people's back of their mind. Yeah, for sure. And hey, Amanda, great to see you. 100% agree. I am feeling more and more confident ever since I left Christianity. Yeah, a lot of us would say it. I say it like this: if I left when I left Christianity, I had 1,000 reasons to leave. I feel like I add another 1,000 every month. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes.
There's more and more.
The further you get from it, the wilder it appears.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Exactly. It's kind of like a relationship. Like if you had a narcissistic relationship, you're like, when you're in it, you're like, should I leave? Should I go? Can we fix this? The further you go, and especially if you get into a new relationship that's healthy, you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, why did I give that even 2 more minutes of my time? Great to see you, Dr. McFarland. Right, only even questioning things is sinful. Yep. Amanda says, yeah, and when I started deconstructing, I had a whole mental breakdown about my identity. I remember crying about it to my believing friends and then thinking I was being dramatic. It was so strange, them thinking I was being dramatic. Yeah. Christians just cannot understand. They truly, and especially honestly, if some of them have a very bland, overly simplistic perspective, it's really simple. Just give it all to God. Give your life to God. Give your concerns to God. Cast your cares in the Lord, for He cares for you. It's really, if it's that simple to them.
I was just gonna say, like, it's like I do think those of us who are kind of on the intellectual, philosophical side, a lot of times we kind of suffer more in life because we're like, that just doesn't work, Felicia.
Exactly. And some people just can't see it. It's funny though that I've shared this story before too. When I was a Christian, and fully a Christian and very intensely a Christian, I had a friend of mine from kindergarten, a girl named Susan, whom I've since interviewed on the channel. A girl named Susan, that we had grown up together. Wonderful girl. We both were very on fire for the Lord. We'd gone separate ways in life, as you do, and got back in touch just because someone told me you need to find out what happened with Susan. Susan's gone off the deep end. Cuckoo. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was like, she'd become an atheist. And I reached out to her, and we just had this little email exchange. 10 years later, I mean, truly, like a whole decade later, I had to reach out to her. I pulled up the same email chain. I was like, Susan, you were right. I see it. There is no God. And 10 years later, and like, you can't. And unfortunately,
I have one of those friends. I have a Susan, but his name is Luther.
It's amazing, but unfortunately, I wasn't a jackass 10 years earlier, so we were still friends at it. But that's the hard part, is a lot of Christians are jackasses when you become an atheist. So when they finally deconvert, it's like you have to decide if you want to be friends with them because they were so mean to you.
But what I have found is that the atheists are much more like, we get it. You weren't trying to be a dick. You were just a Christian. We love you.
Exactly. Yeah. Secular. Do you know David Ames?
I don't.
Okay.
Nah, name's
He talks
familiar.
he talks about secular grace, and yeah, so many of us find that,
Yeah.
not
No.
everybody. There are some atheist
Yeah.
jackasses, to be
Oh
sure,
yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I say they haven't deconstructed fundamentalism
yeah, exactly,
because they're
exactly.
still right. They're just right in their new non-religion.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is an interesting question. I don't know if you want to take more than 30 seconds for this because it's a little off topic, but just since you are a Seventh Day Adventist, as a former Seventh Day Adventist, what did you think of the soul sleep teaching? And I'm just going to define that for anybody,
Ooh.
if anybody wants to know about it. So, soul sleep and conditional immorality. I'm sorry, immortality, not immorality. Freudian slip there. Soul sleep and conditional
Yep.
immortality are two closely related theological views regarding what happens to the human soul after death, but they are a little different. Conditional immortality is the belief that the human soul is not naturally immortal, but it's a gift from God granted only to those who have faith in Christ. Soul sleep, which is a little different, also known as Christian mortalism, describes the intermediate state between physical death and the final resurrection. Proponents believe that during this time, the dead exist in an unconscious sleep like state rather than immediately entering heaven or hell.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, at the time I thought that that was true. There's this Bible verse drilled into our heads, Ecclesiastes 9:5. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know nothing. Like even their hopes, their dreams perish with them, and the memory of them is forgotten. Little did I contemplate that this is in the middle of was it Solomon's um depressive rant, because at the end of that chapter he's like, it is good that men eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And actually he's actually a hopeful nihilist. Like that's hopeful nihilism right there.
Yeah.
That's what he came to after his depression. But so he's just, it's poetry again. He's saying, the dead know nothing. They even, no one's even thinking about them. They already forget. So like today, just eat, drink, and be. It's not a theological bullet point. But anyway, so that was drilled into us. But I think like, man, first of all, I love to make kind of like bizarre Facebook posts now where I'm like, okay, guys, because it was taught to us like, okay, everyone dies, the good and the wicked, and then they're dead, almost like an atheist kind of dead. They're dead until the resurrection at the sound of the last trumpet. And Jesus, like, first he like there's like a resurrection for the righteous and then a resurrection for the wicked, and then the wicked get sent to hell after the righteous are taken to heaven. But I'm like, okay, so what we were taught is that the righteous are resurrected with a new body, a glorified body. So you're still embodied, but now you can fly and time travel. But the wicked are not. They are not given a new body. And that's where it gets interesting, because I will call it out and say, okay, who's resurrecting the wicked? Because Satan can't do that. He can't give life. So you've got God resurrecting the wicked so that they can go to hell. You tell me God and Satan are on the same team because he had to perform a miracle so that they could get punished. And secondly, dude, you got people who are cremated, who've been horrific acts. They're rotting, they're decaying. Like they went back to the earth and now they're being resurrected, but they haven't been given a new body. Are they in their physical body? And then like, okay, in Adventist we had kosher hell. You burn for a period of time in proportion with your degree of sin, and then you get extinguished. This is like one of the big selling points of being an Adventist. We don't have eternal conscious torment. But I'm like, okay, all you eternal conscious torment folks. Um, okay, so you've got a physical body, right? You explain to me who made that physical body, and now explain to me how it's going to burn forever, and how your nerve endings are going to be sensitive to pain from a fire without being burned up. You've got magic and nonsense on every hand. Anyway, all right, well,
No,
side tangent. So, but
I
that
agree.
one actually took me a while to deconstruct. And honestly, I guess full moment of transparency. In this moment, I'm hovering between something more of like a ongoing, more like a spiritual perspective of like the ongoingness of the soul. I have this theory, maybe it's like this the chlorophyll in a leaf, that like at death you like return to the root of the tree, like into the collective. um or is there nothing? But it's not something I spend a great deal of time on. Again, it's like, hey, just be present in this moment, because I know I've got that bird in the hand is better than two in the bush type of deal.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah. I completely agree. I don't think we go anywhere myself, and I wish we did. I still grieve that I have tremendous trauma over the loss of heaven to this day. I really
Uh,
did. I know a lot of people say I didn't want to
well,
go, but I did.
yeah, and I hear a lot of atheists say that, and I appreciate your vulnerability. I think I tend to lean towards that there is something more. I don't know. I've read a lot about psi phenomena and past life regressions. I've done my own regressions. My kids have made statements of memories from before they were my child, even though I've said nothing to them of any of this. And again, they're kids, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of room to hold that as a possibility, and there's also a lot of room to say that's ridiculous.
Exactly. And a lot of stuff too. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens in life, but eventually you gotta believe there's more explanations. If we had full information, I remember, this is a little off topic, but I'll never forget. I worked as a fraud investigator for years for a bank, and I used to help people that had been severely compromised with their identity theft. And this one lady, she she heard someone was calling in and pretending to be her and calling us, and they could answer everything about. They could answer her date of birth, her social, her address, her past addresses, everything. And I said, ma'am, like, and we went through quite a few steps to make sure we were really talking to her, the real person. And I said,
Yeah.
ma'am, this, just so you know, like, this is so serious. We need to come up, like, they're going to keep calling. We need to come up with a question that, like, is so unique to you that nobody will ever know the answer to it. And I said, please take your time, think of some question, and don't tell anybody that you gave us this, but something no one else knows. And she said, okay, well, she was like from Ukraine or something. Like, I'm from Ukraine, and I had a childhood dog, and no one would know the name of my childhood dog from Ukraine. Nobody. And she gave me the answer. And don't you know, those fucking identity thefts, they called in within 5 minutes and they answered that question. And I
Whoa.
was like, it's just, but you're like, well, is that magic? We don't know. But like, you just got to think to yourself, I cannot believe, just because something seems incredible, that there's not, if there's more information, that there's not some other explanation for it besides,
Yeah.
woo woo. And I
Yeah.
don't know. There's
Right.
part of me that
Right.
I also think, regarding going back to the afterlife question, and I'll keep this short. Um, my question is, like, if we get an afterlife, then it would be arrogant of us to say that no other earlier species or earlier versions of humans get it, just us. Like, why did Homo sapiens get it? So is there a Neanderthal kind of version of heaven? Is there an earlier version? Is there a version of Australopithecus that gets to heaven? Do the turtles go to heaven? And eventually you have to say, well, why do we get it but they don't?
Right. I feel like if there is an answer to that, and again, to me, it's like, don't hit me with your religious book. I don't care about your religious book. I care about, if anything, it's going to be science and stories and experiences and where these things intersect. And again, there's nothing close to answers or like objective proof. But I certainly feel like there's enough, say, near death experiences with or past life regressions where people are like speaking languages they don't know. They're describing. There's so much to say. Hey, there's more going on we don't know. Quantum physics is mind blowing. Um,
It is.
but
Absolutely.
I think that the answers. Oh, I was gonna say, okay. To me, if there is a theory that holds any water, it's more like the many lives, multiple lives type of things, and maybe we are essentially reincarnating or evolving through different species or expanding in consciousness. So it's not just like limited to humans. It's like it's everything. And again, that also sounds absurd to me saying that. Like I wouldn't necessarily say I believe that, but if you look at the stories and the science out there, if anything, it tends to favor something in that direction. I am very interested in plasma theory. I almost hate saying that out loud because all the plasma scientists mysteriously die, which points towards clouds of plasma demonstrating behaviors of evolving consciousness.
Hmm.
There's so much
Never heard of that.
like clean energy potential in plasma science, which seems to be why the scientists are all dying mysteriously at young ages right now. Um, but again, it's like, okay, so say it's true that, in plasma theory, that there are clouds of plasma that are demonstrating patterns. They truly are conscious. Say they're evolving consciousness just in these particles of air. Well, then again, just because we say there's a mystery or maybe something beyond, it doesn't mean that there's a God. It doesn't mean Christianity is true. And it definitely doesn't mean there's a man in the sky. It means that there's mysteries that we don't know. All it means is there's things we don't know. So maybe
Yeah.
it's plasma clouds, creating these kind of synchronicities. Who knows?
Yeah, and really, we could argue at this point, it's not just that there's some things we don't know, but probably almost everything about almost
Everything.
everything we don't know.
Right. Oh, have you
It's
ever heard the theory that we are a third grade alien's failed science experiment on his closet shelf, planet Earth, in a little
no, but
the
that's a good way to
universe in a little
that's a good
jar?
way that's a good way to put it. The one I
Like,
heard
think
is
about ants. Maybe some ant is like, could you imagine? Like, maybe we live on a planet that belongs to humans.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the one I heard is a little bit more simple. Just what if literally this entire universe is a drop of water in somebody's watering can? Like
Yeah,
how would you know?
yeah,
How would you know?
yeah.
You just
Exactly. How
yeah,
would an
but
ant know what we're doing right now?
exactly. Well, let me go
Yeah,
through a few more quick
yeah,
questions here. So I hope that answers your question about soul sleep. Basically, we're saying we don't believe in the religious version of that, but we're certainly love to think about the mysteries of life. I will just add real quick. Um, I think that's similar. The idea of living forever is similar with the worldview versus belief system. I don't believe we go anywhere when we die, but my worldview says we do, and I live as if it
mm,
matters, as if
mm,
there's a
mm,
really good purpose
mm,
to it. And I
mm,
honestly don't know that I want
mhm,
to lose that. I don't know that I want to dig into that part of my worldview.
mhm,
I like living with a
mhm,
purpose, even though I know it's
mhm.
probably a bit of a non sequitur. But anyway, Christy,
Yeah,
awesome
one
information.
more quick note on that. I have a
Sure.
client I've worked with quite a while that actually has tons of trauma around this concept of life going on and on. She deconstructed from very traumatic high control, like, the holler in the South. Um, but then she came into spirituality and this kind of like ongoing many lives. And that was maybe more horrific than maybe even than hell in a way, because her own life, this life, had been so traumatic that the thought of it perpetuating on forever was like, it's like a merry-go-round you can never get off. And I have had that experience too, and, like, there's probably someone listening right now who's felt that way, who actually feels so much trauma around life that, like, imagining that this life is one and done and then it's over and out. That's actually a very comforting thought. So I just want to acknowledge and validate that. That makes a lot of sense. There's part of me that relates with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's everyone has a different perspective on it. I've heard some interesting reasons for people would say you truly would not want to live forever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I at the same time I know that I personally would, but I get it. We're all coming at it from different angles, and it is really
Yeah.
sad too. Just to comment on what you just said, it's sad to think about the fact that if like I believe and have concluded that there probably isn't a second life, it is really sad to think about people where the majority of their lives has just been trauma and identity theft in terms of like
Yes.
spiritual. Like I get reached out to. I'm actually working on a presentation called something like deconversion in the sunset years. But like I get people that reach out to
Oh,
me when they're like
yes.
70, 75 years old, and they're like, I can't believe that I am just starting my life at 75 years old. And that's
Yup.
that's a
I
really
get a
hard pill to
lot of
swallow.
that too. Yes. Yeah, and man, we need to have a discussion after this, but like I feel like there's only two real paths to take them down. One is, what do you want to do with the time you have left? But really the bigger thing is just time to grieve. We're here to grieve. And that is heavy. Yes. Yes, I
Exactly.
love that you're bringing that up.
But also it's time to grieve, but also at the same time, like don't I mean, pardon my language, but don't let these goddamn motherfuckers take another minute of your time. They've taken enough time.
Fuck yeah. Yes.
It's like
Yes.
just grieve a little bit, sure, and grieve as much as you need to. Don't let anyone tell you you have to
Yeah.
stop until you're ready. But like
Yeah.
if you think you should have lived it up a little bit and had a party in your life,
Yeah.
make it a party
Yeah.
from this point on if you
Yeah,
can.
what can you do now? Yes, yes. But yeah, I mean, I've had some of them where it's like they're truly at the end of their life, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like all these normal coaching things you would do to help someone get back onto their life. It's like, wow, oh. I feel the grief in that. Wow. Yeah. And it's surprising. We think of deconstruction being like maybe something someone does at the end of college in their 20s. It's very common at the end of life. And my theory as to why is you've seen the cycle, you've seen generations, you've seen the fallout, the impact, you've seen the way it's influenced you, and all those thought leaders, those pastors, whatever, the ones that influence you, they're all dead now, and you're seeing younger ones that you've watched from the beginning. And you get it, but you get it towards the end. And yeah, that is a huge topic. I'm really glad you're hitting on that.
Yeah, it's frustrating to because you're like, what can you say in some ways apart from
Yep.
just do your best and try to dance and shine your light as bright as you can from this point.
Yeah. Yep.
Susanna in Scotland. Hey everyone, great to see you. I'm not sure if Susanna's still up. It is 1:15 in the morning there, but if you're still with us, Susanna, great to see you. Janine, hey. Deleting says, I very much love the title of this video. Yep, if it's your life, you write the script.
Mhm.
And that was just, by the way, that was something that Kristi has written her website. And I did want to make sure I didn't fail to remind everybody of that. Her website is risewithincoaching.com. It's also linked in this video.
Mhm.
Rise Within Coaching. Also, her Instagram handle is Rise Within Coaching. So please do like and subscribe. HVAC, Harmonic is belching them out today. Yep, the second interview. I've got two more. Hopefully, if no one cancels tomorrow, I've got two. I've got a pastor. And again, I just had a mega church pastor come on the other day, and I've got a pastor. By the way, give this guy some support. Go look him up on YouTube and all that. His handle is Andy Hikes. Just Andy Hikes.
Oh my gosh, you're having Andy Hikes.
Yeah, he's coming on tomorrow.
I love that guy. He is my hero.
So cool. He is awesome. Yeah. He's been getting a lot of flack from people.
Oh my gosh.
Give him love. Give him like so much love.
Fucking love that guy. What a story. So he and his wife adopted these special needs foster kids who in many ways ruined their lives. But he and his wife did everything they could for these kids with no resources from the state, no support. And he was a pastor, and in the process of all of this, he started realizing trauma and systems and power and control and deconstructed, and now he's more of a like animist, but he has this really beautiful like nature centric worldview. What a great guy. Oh, how cool that you're having him on. I'm like, tell him hi for me. He has no idea who I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he's like he calls himself a pantheist or a
Like
that.
panentheist.
Panentheist, yeah.
Because a pantheist is like God is everything,
Everywhere.
and a panentheist is like there is like spirituality or spirit in everything. It's whatever it is, panentheist, we're all going to say is a little bit healthier. I don't know. It's a beautiful perspective.
Yeah, I think he's the first person I will have had on the channel who would use that word. So I'm looking forward to hearing how he uses it. But yeah, I'm thank you, HVAC, for your support. I'm so honored to be able to do interviews. I've got several more coming in the next few days after that too. So keep an eye out. And if you can't join us live, feel free to watch the replays. Susanna again says, love what I'm hearing. Yes, the title drew me before I sleep. Yep. Hopefully, Susanna, you are asleep, because I know Susanna's a dear friend of mine, someone who loves this channel, and she's got a lot of kids and she's got a lot of responsibility. So hopefully you're asleep by now. But anyway, let's see here. Love that. Agree the church doesn't make sense whatsoever, but neither does Jesus' teaching according to the Bible. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I hear you there. I hear you. Big topic.
Yep. Jonathan, thank you again for your super chat. Wow, it's 3-4 super chats in one day. I appreciate your support so very much. I really do. Thank you. Yeah, Jesus and the gospel make about 0 sense. Yeah, and I think the thing, I say this a lot, I know, but when you realize that they're copying from Homer's Odyssey and you realize they're copying from the stories of Dionysius, it's like it's not supposed to make sense. It's just another story. But
it's Lord of the Rings.
Exactly. Kristi and Tim, please keep up the marvelous work. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, Noah's fable never actually happened. It's all about control. Susanna again says, love Kristi's passion about how traumatic the Christian messaging is. I remember the same messages from the pulpit about young earth being true and not supporting the gay community. The pure control, asking us to be open and honest, even about our thought life. I found that shameful and violating.
Yes. I remember a few years ago in my 30s realizing, hey, people don't know my thoughts, and they don't have to know my thoughts, and they don't get to know my thoughts. Wild. It's like realizing that your changing room has a door you can shut.
Exactly. Real quick, I'm going to look up a link for something I want to share real quick before we move on to the next comment, because it's related to it. I'm going to put in a link here for Troy Stober's channel. I'd like to, if you all have not subscribed to it yet, please
Oh,
do.
I love this guy too. Yeah, he's in my group, my
Troy?
Facebook
Okay.
group. So my Facebook group is called Deconstruction Church. And earlier today it had 999 people in it. So maybe one of your audience can be the lucky 1,000th member.
Nice. It's a shame it wasn't 666. I would love to, or
I know,
600.
I thought that too. I thought that I was like, this is a slightly better number, I suppose.
Exactly. Everyone, I'm going to put a link in for Troy's YouTube channel, The Deepest Hell. Troy
Mhm.
is the next comment. He did a super chat. Thank you so much, Troy. I appreciate your support. The passion is inspirational. I love the curious skepticism. Absolutely. And Troy I did an interview with him a while ago, but he's
Mhm.
also a YouTuber. He's getting started, but he's doing great work. Please go like and
Mhm.
subscribe. Troy's an amazing guy, and it's been an honor to be connected with him as well. Thank you again, Troy. Mark, also in the UK, go Kristi. Mark in the UK and Susanna in Scotland. I don't know how you all stay up so late. I'm almost 50 years old, and I tell you, I just can't do the late hours these days. Just can't do it. Mark says you too, son. Jonathan, so where does morality come from? It developed in us humans as a social species, and every sane person has a much better innate morality than it's portrayed in the Bible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
they'll write you off and say it's not about happiness, and yet they do everything to gain heaven and avoid hell. Yeah. I'm sorry,
And
Mark.
they market their whole thing as like, this is the ultimate path to happiness. And then they like flip around and say, God wants you holy, not happy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the hamster wheel. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mark. I hope you get some sleep soon. Eoz, am I saying EOIZ is not the way. Forced practice can wound, but that critique applies to any coercive parenting. Plenty raised in faith reported as formative, not traumatic. The variable is parents, not belief itself. I think there's probably more that I would want to
Oh,
clarify on that, but
yeah.
I don't want to go down the rabbit trail for tonight. But
Right. Yeah. Huge topic. There's some truth to that, and some of it's probably a bit skewed.
yeah, but UIZ, I just want to make sure I'm clear. This is an atheist channel, and we want to keep it safe. If there's anybody that is doing anything in any way to encourage people to go back to faith, this is not the place for them.
Yeah.
That is considered gaslighting. So I'm not sure if that's what you're doing, but I just want to make sure you're aware of what I'm doing here. I do try to keep this community in the comments safe. Yeah, good point, Tim, regarding Trump, and he is toxic as they come, but helping us to help people escape. Yep. And Mark says, I debunked Christian morality because of my empathy for the suffering of others. Yeah. Amen.
Yes. I just said this to one of my atheist best friends the other day. I said, the post-Christian community that I found are just, I would say, the most beautiful, kind-hearted group of humans I have ever known. I guess compared to fundamentalist Christians, but a lot of us deconstructed because our ethics and morality outgrew Christianity. That was a big part of why we left.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think a lot of us are seeing that play out, like with the, just love your neighbor as yourself. And how can
Yep,
Christians not do that with ICE and with all this other stuff going on? It's
correct.
insane.
Yep. I love
Janine,
you, but
what was that?
I love you, but it's an I love you, but I love you, but.
Yep. Let's see here. Stan Michelle, Slater, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it so much. I'm going to go a little bit faster here because we're a little bit past 2 hours, and I don't want to make you stay too late. I didn't get you to sign up for more than 2 hours, so I appreciate you being here though.
I have no commitments. I'm good.
Gotcha. Thank you. I got a troll. Jesus is Lord. No, I'm sorry, he's not. He's
Maybe
mythology.
for
So
you.
thank you for coming. And survey says, let's see here. Yeah, don't let those fuckers steal any more time from you.
Oh,
And see here, Lila Feldman says, learning empathy really went against the morality, at least as it's taught by certain ones today. Yeah, and
mhm.
their catchphrase, really, I'm sure we've all heard, is that empathy is a sin, and that's really
But yeah,
just
that's kind of the new up and coming thing.
yeah. The Doug Wilson
Just
call, I
like,
think, has made that
yeah,
really intense. But yeah,
yes,
they're
yeah.
on, they're showing their true colors. But I mean, that's in some
I've
ways they're helping us do our jobs.
Yeah, I've heard it said, we were the VeggieTales generation. You go to Sunday school and they're singing, "Love your neighbor. If someone hurts you, then you'll understand." And it's like, and then it's like, it doesn't matter what they look like. I can't remember how it goes, but it's this whole, like everyone's equal, doesn't matter their skin color, blah, blah, blah. And then our generation deconstructing is like, we're just doing what you taught us from VeggieTales. And you're over here like, oh, don't leave the church. And we're like, we're doing what you taught us.
Exactly. Exactly. So many of us are literally taking the best parts, I would argue, of Christianity. We're leaving some really shitty parts, piles of shitty parts, but we're taking the best parts and saying, this, we want to be good humans. We really want to be good humans. And it's great. It's crazy the way Christian nationalism has, it's helpful though. It's been interesting to see that for some people, you hear the VeggieTale stuff and you hear the similar messages from church, but then you go different ways where one group goes to Christian nationalism, one group says, no, we're deconstructing. And it's so helpful to me to realize we were saying the same thing for so long, but it meant something different to each of us. And that for them, it meant love your neighbor as long as they're white and they're Christian. And it's like, okay, so we sang the same songs, but you meant something different this whole time. And in some ways, I think the reason I say it is it helps us to deconstruct and heal from the need for the community, because for so many of us are like, we miss the community, but it's like, but the community's not what we thought it was,
Yeah, no. One of the things that like I long for, it's heavy on my heart. I feel like that's Christianese. And my intention is
Exactly.
to create communities for not even just for people who've deconstructed or for atheists, but for humans. So my vision is I'm starting with the coaching. I'm stepping into public speaking right now and pitching my first TED talk. But I want to turn this into a trauma healing movement, where something like this, where wherever you are in the country, just like you could go to church, you could find it's a volunteer led group, a circle where we tell our stories. We talk about what's happened in our week or what's happened in our lives, where there's someone facilitating and leading this, almost like free group therapy. And then we do like body based trauma release. But we're building community around that so we can have the goodness of community without the exclusivity. And then I want to use those groups and that whole community, turn it into like a annual retreat and all of this. Use that as a fundraising platform to create in every state or multiple in a state communities for women escaping abuse, no questions asked, because he didn't have to hit you for it to be abuse. This is what I want to do before I die, and my life will be complete.
I love it. Well, as that moves forward, please do feel free to, make sure you reach out to channels like mine, and we'll, whatever stages you're at, we'll try to plug it and make sure it gets on blast, because I'd love to be
That's
part of that.
huge. That is huge. That is key for me right now. I deeply appreciate you both creating and sharing this space with me so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know we've gone over. Could I ask just for a final word from you on two things? Could you tell us personally how the healing has been going over the last few years since you've been deconstructing and deconverting? What is it? Where are you at with it all now? Are you doing okay, or do you feel like you're still in the darkest part of it, or so forth? What is it? What has it been like? And then I see obviously with your Instagram page and your website, you are trying to turn your journey into a way to help other people. And so, could you also just give a plug for your platforms and your practice as to how people can connect with you?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
we'll
I
wrap
feel
up.
like my own journey is going great. It is step by step. I feel like I'm kind of in that again, I feel like I've kind of been going to like a quasi Christian church for a while, but maybe finally saying like, hey, that's not how I want to spend my Sundays. I just don't see that. And rebuilding community. I'm going through a major life transition right now myself too. So my external world is in a bit of upheaval, but internally I feel calm, grounded. I feel an immense sense of purpose. I feel such deep fulfillment in what I get to do, who I get to work with. Really joy, actual joy, not like the church had. I've never felt better. Um, and what I do, so I've got my website, Rise Within Coaching. So I do one-on-one coaching, hour-long Zoom sessions, to your schedule. We can do individual sessions. Most people like to do a 6 session package, but the first session is free. And that is just for us to spend time to get to know each other, to see if we're a good fit. But it is not a sales pitch. It's actually an hour of coaching. There's no pressure to sign up. Um, but I say I myself bounce between probably about 13 different coaches and therapists, and there were just deeper layers that I was dealing with. I was dealing with almost crippling anxiety, and I couldn't make sense of it. And what I found is just like talking about my story. Well, at first there was a therapist who was like, "Have you tried praying about it?" Like, did I pay you $80 for that? Like that was the whole thing. But even the ones who were
Wow.
more secular, and it's like, we're talking through my story, there were deeper layers. So I threw myself into researching trauma, researching religious trauma, nervous system work, all of this, and trying to see what is the best scientific based evidence that we have for working with trauma. In my background, I've got a master's in nursing leadership and management, so it's very research based. Okay, so it's like I wanted to bring neuroscience and research into this work. So in my practice, it's like the longer I coach, the more I believe in the method that I developed, and the more transformation I see, usually quite quickly. It's three pieces: story work, subconscious, somatics. So we're going to start going through your story, but we use that as a portal or a doorway into your body. What's going on in your body? Is your neck tight? Butterflies in your stomach? Are you going numb? What's going on? What's the wisdom in your body? What's the story? What's this young child part? How do we release that? How do we reset the nervous system, reset the vagus nerve? All these kind of trending words out there if you're in the trauma healing space. Um, how do you find your identity, your purpose? I teach business building. I teach how to become a coach or build your own business where you take your passion, turn it into profit. Um, and it's so fulfilling. So just if that sounds like something you want to do, jump on over to my website and book your first call and we'll get to know each other, see if it's a good fit.
Hmm. I love it. Amazing stuff. Well, I definitely want to have you back at some point. I feel like we could do more conversations on some topical things, as well as certainly I've got some roundtables planned for several religious trauma coaches to come in at the same time, and just sort of
Oh,
roundtable some stuff. So at some point I'll definitely have you back. But this has been a
oh,
great
that'd be so
first.
cool.
Yeah, it's a great first step. I really, really appreciate it, and just appreciate your time. Let me just read a few final comments, and then we'll say goodnight for the night. Let's see here. We caught up with most of them. Um, Kyle says, "I know of Christians who mocked others and didn't practice what they preached. Definitely not very loving." Yeah, so many of us did. Yeah, we're doing what you taught us. Yep. Kristi, you have a lot of valuable knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate your support so much.
Thanks.
And Janine, you get the last word. Sounds helpful for women who previously didn't work because of religion. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. A lot of
Yes.
starting over. Hmm.
Yep.
Awesome sauce. So we could go on for a while, but I think 2.5 hours is good. But thank you so much. This is really good. And I just want to encourage everybody, please do check out our Kristi's Instagram page, Rise Within Coaching. It's beneath the description of this video. But everyone, thank you again so much. Kristi, great to get to know you. Thanks for your time. And everyone in the comments, thank you for being a part of our lives and for letting us be a part of yours. And we'll talk to you soon. And Mark has the last word as well here. Grateful to meet Kristi. Thanks, Mark. Thank you all so much. Have a great night. Thanks, Kristi.